Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast. This is a podcast where me and my co-host Barry are going to talk about board games. How you doing, Barry?
Again. Yeah, if you're expecting anything different this episode, switch off now.
It's not going to be different, and we're just going to talk about games, more games. And the good news is, just like last time and every other time, all of the links and time codes are down. Well, I don't know if they're links, actually. There are time codes in the description. And if you're watching this or listening to this on a platform that accommodates those time codes, you may be able to skip to the stuff that interests you. And if you just want to listen to us talk for a couple hours, then great.
We're here to help you pass the time.
Exactly right. We've got too much time. And you can't be playing board games all the time, so you might as well listen to some board games instead.
Correct.
So we'll jump straight into the news this week.
And things we've seen. What we've seen. What a great segment. So one of the most interesting things from the last couple of weeks has been the Danes standalone game with a Feast for Odin system. So this is A Feast for Odin, the Danes. And this started, I believe this started as a Norwegians expansion, or at least another expansion to A Feast for Odin, which then has now become its own game, and is different enough to warrant being its own game, and not just being a standalone expansion. Now, there's not a huge amount of information out there when I first seen this and when it was put up, but it is coming to crowdfunding the first quarter of next year, 2026, and it's currently unclear whether or not you'll be able to mix the content. I think at best some of it will be compatible, but I don't think it's going to be designed to be incorporated into your current games for A Feast for Odin. My biggest hopes for this one are that there's some sort of upgrade kit for people that have the old version of A Feast for Odin, which is the version I have. I'm missing the 2023 reprint, extra player board, 2-player board, and expansion 2, mini expansion 2, which now comes as standard in the current printing, and you can't get it really anymore. I've tried previously buying it from Foyerland, but they won't ship to the UK. So, and I don't think they even have it on their site anymore. So I don't particularly want to have to rebuy the core game just to get one board and 4 tokens, but I will. But this, I think this will be the kind of evolution, the same way Age of Innovation was to Gaia Project Terra Mystica, but specifically Terra Mystica. I think this might be a potential replacement for A Feast for Odin, depending on what it ends up being like.
Well,
and A Feast for Odin's a very good game.
A Feast for Odin is a very good game. I think we could probably fill this entire podcast with is Age of Innovation a replacement for Terra Mystica, but I don't think we should. No. If you want to hear that, comment or send us a message. AskReadyToSayPodcast@gmail.com. We'll definitely read the email. Anyway, I mean, I like Feast for Odin. I don't think I have the mini expansion that you're missing, so we're probably playing the same version of the game. I have the older. I don't know when I don't know when the copy I have was printed, but I feel like it was definitely before 2023.
Yeah.
I also have the Norwegians expansion.
Yeah.
Yep, which is great. I think that just wholly improves it and integrates very easily. It's, for those that are completely unaware, it's worker placement and polyomino placement, really. You're putting workers out on a board and then collecting polyomino pieces that you're going to stash in your longhouses and whatnot. And then you have to feed your people, because of course you do. Good news is this time
Classic.
You can feed them gold.
They'll eat anything.
Yep. But it's a nice game. I'd be interested in a more modular or more complex version. I think, Feast for Odin sits solidly in the, easy. It's ironic, really, because, the way most people define cozy games, I don't think I define cozy games the same way. I would describe Feast for Odin as a cozy game. It's not light. It's pretty heavy and it's quite long, but for me because there's very little player interaction. There's just enough to sort of keep you engaged. And then the rest is just quietly filling in a little puzzle, a big puzzle, a potentially quite large puzzle. But that's it.
Fair. Yes, I don't think many people would describe A Feast for Odin as a cozy game. It is quite involved for a cozy game, and you can go horribly wrong, at least in comparison to the people you're playing it with. You have a terrible first couple of turns, you're not coming back. So,
but you can just ignore them and enjoy filling up your little houses.
True.
At the end of the day, there's very little player interaction beyond, oh no, your house is better filled than mine. So just ignore it. If you think you're doing badly, just ignore it and focus on, what you need to do. But yeah, I'm keen to see that. That's coming Q1 20. Oh yeah, you said crowdfunding.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the right choice for that. Who's doing that crowdfunding?
Well, Fireland. Spiel,
have they done
or whatever
crowdfunding before?
I don't know. Let's have a little look at what they've published.
So this is a well-established German company that publishes games from German designers and quite often lets the games out to other companies for localization. A lot of the Feuerland games end up with Capstone, particularly for North American distribution. And there is also a British company that winds up with a lot of them for English European distribution, but I can't remember who that is. So you'll sometimes see Feuerland on the box in addition to something else.
Yeah, I can't see anything from the last couple of years that was obviously kickstarted. To my mind, they do publish other people's works as well. But yeah, there's nothing there. Even the Terra Mystica big box wasn't.
That wasn't crowdfunded. And then actually, interestingly, also, I'm just trying to think: has Uwe Rosenberg ever had a crowdfunded game? I guess a Qwirkle special edition.
Oh, now, yeah.
Now, but not his designs are not typically crowdfunded, I don't think. Anyway, just interesting. Not of any real consequence.
Free marketing.
I'll tell you what is of real consequence. This is an exciting headline that just dropped today, except that was a week ago when you're seeing this. Yeah. So everyone will be
literally minutes before the podcast.
Yeah, and a week ago when you're listening to this. So you'll all be well aware of the announcement of Brass Pittsburgh, which will be crowdfunded. So this is from Roxley Games, who published the Brass Birmingham and Brass Lancashire. Of course, Lancashire was a reprint of the 2007 Brass. Was it 2007 or 5? I think it was 7. But I think 7 might have been Age of Steam and Brass might have been 2005. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's all gone in the annals of history. Brass Pittsburgh will be designed by Gavin Brown and Martin Wallace. I don't know how involved Martin Wallace has been there. I don't know how involved Martin Wallace was actually in Brass Birmingham either, to be fair. But of course, Martin Wallace was the designer of Brass Lancashire. And Matt Tolman, who is also credited on Brass Birmingham, is not, I don't think, involved in this one. So far what they've announced is they've shown one box art, which shows a steam train running the rails. And so it's going to be set during the American Gilded Age. It's the northeastern Steel Belt region. And you play as ruthless American industrial titans. You can be Cornelius Vanderbilt, Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and Henry Flick, possibly amongst others. And you will build sprawling networks of railways, pipelines, steel mills, oil refineries, and more. There will indeed be 3 box arts available through the GameFound campaign. So the art's by Mr. Cuddington, who you may know as the artist from Tidal Blades, Heroes of the Reef, which was a Druid City Kickstarter where you play as fish people going on adventures. Right, and that recently delivered a second Kickstarter, but that's like an RPG sort of adventure thing. Anyway, different game. But the point is, the art for the box is going to be done by Mr. Cuddington. Apparently there will be 3 covers. The train cover that they've already released, plus 2 more covers, one of which will have traditional Eurogame faces on it. So I don't know if you're picturing original Great Western Trail like I am. I guess something like that. And also there's apparently one that's going to be more provocative. I don't know what that means. But I note that I read through all of Gavin's notes about the sort of the design and what he was intending and what he'd sort of done with it. And a lot of it was largely, notes on. I mean, it seems to be going well, but didn't really tell us anything much about the game or how it's going to function, other than I think he had intended it to be lighter than Brass Birmingham, and now it looks like it's going to be heavier. So that's about all we know about the game so far. That, and it's coming to GameFound February 3rd, 2026. So really precise date. Then also it's apparently almost finished. So it's really in sort of the final stages of people testing it and trying to break it, and also making sure that the sort of diehard Brass fans are satisfied with it. Now, there was a conversation that sprung up around a disclaimer that Roxley made, which I think they offered this up unprovoked. I don't know if there's been a history of people complaining that the Brass games do not do enough to acknowledge the hardships or negative social elements of the Industrial Revolution. But Roxley issued a statement alongside the announcement of the Kickstarter that said, "We acknowledge the exploitation of workers, children, and marginalized groups, including women, indigenous peoples, and the Black community that fueled industrial growth during Pittsburgh's Gilded Age. While Brass Pittsburgh focuses on the economic and industrial aspects of this era, we recognize the human cost behind it. We do not romanticize unbridled capitalism nor glorify the robber barons of the time, but rather aim to explore this complex chapter of history through its industries and innovations." So this sparked a conversation on the forums, which was as back and forth as you can imagine, about, should we be talking about that? Does it matter? Does it need to be in all the games? Does the historical context matter? And I do think it's complex. I don't think it's good to not acknowledge it. I think personally, I'm satisfied with maybe an acknowledgement in the rulebook or something like that. I'm not sure every game lends itself to tackling complex social impacts in the game state. Now, there might be a wider conversation around, should we keep putting players in charge of the companies where, your chief goal is to get the most victory points for earning the most money by basically being implied the most exploitative capitalist, without actually worrying about any of the actual exploitation that's going on under the hood, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So, you made the most money, you get the most victory points, and don't worry about the rest. Should we make the heroes someone else? But suffice to say, we understand that the Brass mechanisms and systems, it is a game of economics and logistics, not a game of sort of complex social impacts. A good designer may be able to figure out a way to integrate that. Certainly, we've seen some elements of that come into game design. And of course, it is incorporated, for example, into Hegemony, albeit that Hegemony is a wildly different game, to this. It's not focused on necessarily industry and logistics unless you're the capital class, in which case it is, right? So that's asymmetrical rules in that game. But there was a lot of people defending Brass Lancashire and Brass Birmingham for having covered this stuff with grace previously. And I was like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't remember anything about the social impact of the Industrial Revolution in either of those games. So I went back and I had a read of the rule books, and I don't know what anyone's talking about. There's a tiny snippet about the Industrial Revolution, and then there's 8 bios of heroes of the Industrial Revolution, and not anywhere does it mention anything about the awful stuff that was happening, and it's in the I looked up some facts, and they're really depressing, so scrub ahead now if you don't like depressing facts. But in Brass Birmingham, for example, you're building coal mines, and you're building cotton mills, and you're building steel mines. And at the time the game is set, you probably had a workforce where about 50% of your workers were under 20, and at least 20% of those were under 10. And your workforce included people as young as 4 years old, and they would work shifts that were 12 to 14 hours long. So child labor was absolutely a thing that was incredibly rife. Furthermore, your company probably paid these people using tokens that they could only redeem in the company shops. And the companies did this to stop the workers building up their own wealth or going anywhere else. It was in order to control them because they could set the price in those shops, and they'd set them so high that the workers couldn't make any savings. It would make them less mobile, and ultimately would also give the company a lot more control over the workers as well. So they wouldn't pay them in legal tender. I think we did revise that, but I don't think it was until 1845 we actually brought in a rule that you have to pay your workers legal tender. And like in England. And none of that is covered at all or remotely mentioned in the rulebook anywhere. And that's just, scratching the surface of, how this stuff worked. They'd bring lots and lots of workers in from all over the country. They'd ruin agricultural frameworks in order to steal workers away. They'd put them in areas that were massively overcrowded and were horribly afflicted with the pollution from the mines. And then they do have all of these bios, and they touch on one person's bio, which is this guy, Rupert. Is it Rupert? I think it's Rupert. Yeah, Rupert Owens. They talk about him in his bio, and he's like the only socialist they talk about. And I found out, actually, it was really interesting. He's got this whole sort of philosophical framework that was quite interesting. But, it turns out that among his many achievements, the sort of invention of the public library and the 8-hour workday are both things that he implemented and that we have today, thanks to him. But unfortunately, through all of his philanthropic and socially minded endeavors, he ultimately went bankrupt and was taken apart by the other capitalists. So that's sad. It doesn't mention that in his bio, I don't think, in the bio he's got in the rulebook there. So, anyway, the point is I'm a hypocrite because I'm conscious of these things. They really make me really sad, but also I love Brass Birmingham. It's a really compelling puzzle. So, I do maybe wish that they'd mentioned something in the rulebook just to acknowledge that stuff. Although I appreciate that it is really depressing when you're playing the little game with the little tokens to be putting them out and going, yes, another child labor workforce over here. And actually,
for the mine.
I was thinking also, I was revising the rulebook as well, and I was thinking about that token system. It's called the trucks system, by the way. And I was like, so this is why we don't pay wages in the game. That's a thematic choice. I thought it was mechanical this whole time, but no, thematically, we just don't pay any wages. But, so I do not think that the Brass games are good games to hold up as examples of games that are, covering the social issues of the time or the period. Maybe that's why Roxley released this statement, but I don't know what the right way to handle this.
I just feel like people are becoming more aware, right? And so any further context and education is just useful. I don't feel necessarily that I might talk a little bit about this in a minute, but I don't feel necessarily that Brass is either glorifying in a way where it suggests that you emulate the barons of the day now, or portraying those that were oppressed negatively within the game. And providing additional context in new games where you are in a time period, in every time period, every time period will have something where making people aware of the social issues of the day and the potential impact that it still has on people's lives today. It's just useful. Then people can make their own decisions, the amount of games about colonization where there's just no mention of it at all. I don't feel like you have to not set a game in a period of colonization, in which case, you'd rule out most of history. But I also don't feel, or at least that, if people do include it and make people aware of that, to be lauded and...
Well, the games are sort of a victim of the time period, right? Because obviously this is a much bigger topic, and I'll try to rein it back into Brass Pittsburgh. But just very quickly on the subject, they put out it's another Martin Wallace game, Struggle of Empires, in which you would capture slaves from Africa and bring them to Europe to run your plantations. And functionally, the way it worked in the game is the black slaves were little cubes that you would move across your galleons into America, and then you'd get a discount on running your plantations over there and setting them up. And when Eagle Gryphon Games republished it with the sort of deluxeified edition, and they made a number of rules changes, they also decided that the slavery was too evocative and too controversial, I guess. I mean, putting words in their mouth. I don't know what their official statement was, so I can only conjecture. But they replaced the term slavery and the little brown cubes with not a different system, but they've called it Gold Coast commerce in the game. And so if you engage in Gold Coast commerce, you get discounts on your plantations. So it's functionally the same mechanism. We've just overlooked the name. Now, I don't condone that at all. I do not think that's the right approach. I think that's the worst approach. And, I appreciate, like, sometimes they have to make these sort of historical decisions for other reasons. I'm thinking specifically now of how Qwirkle had to take the opium trade out of John Company's second edition because the Chinese manufacturers wouldn't publish it with the opium trade in there. They didn't like that. But that's a slightly different case. Anyway, the point is, in terms of sort of sensitivity to these historical events, I think for me, the answer is education. And it's to put an acknowledgement, at the very least, to put an acknowledgement in the rule book, maybe even some educative text, just because it is difficult to set a game in that era in which it is a competitive game and we are, there are choices, right? Like, you could be making Freedom the Underground Railroad, in which case you are playing as sort of social heroes. But it's an entirely different game to a game that puts you in the role of, say, a European power trying to compete on the global market economically or territorially. So, and, am I saying we should never set a game in the future where you're playing as these powers that were acting in a way we look back on and go, good God, what villains, should you never play as the villains historically? No, I don't think so. And it's tragic because, to this day, nobody's really been effectively penalized for the acts of slavery and capturing slaves in Africa, and it's such a complex situation. But, it's not like, we can say, at the time, well, and there is one game, I think it's Age of Discovery, the game by Glenn Drover. I think at some point there's a card that sort of tips the balance where if you have, it's like, oh, you've proceeded enough into the future now that the sort of the movement against slavery has started. And now if you have cards with slaves on them, you suffer negative repercussions. Was it in Age of Discovery? It might have been in Europa Universalis Price of Power. I can't remember. Actually, no, it is. It's in Europa Universalis Price of Power. This card that sort of like, you get these slave cards if you engage in that part of the game. And then if you have them later on, when the opinion starts to change, they will come back and have detriments, which I think is actually the sort of the correct way to handle this stuff. It happened. You have to leave it in. You have to leave it in as it was as well. We can't just start pretending that people had different ideas back then or different opinions. I don't think that's helpful either. And I think it undermines the educational value of it. But I do think, that it's also, it would be nice to see more creative thinking around like games set in the era that, for example, Rupert Owens, is a very interesting character. And unfortunately, led kind of a tragic story, but it'd be really interesting to focus on that kind of stuff, Anyway, far be it from me to tackle that stuff. My historical knowledge is not that great to design a complex, subtle, nuanced historical game. But I am still excited to play Brass Pittsburgh.
I've never played Lancashire. I've played Birmingham. And it was good. Good the second time round.
Good the second time. Wait, did you play it wrong?
No, I didn't play it wrong. Just, I think I've mentioned before, there's a couple of my friends who, when they teach a game, I'm like, this is awful. And then I'll learn the rules myself and they'll play it again. It's like, oh, this is quite good.
Fair enough. Well, Lancashire, for those that haven't played, is quicker, it's simpler, and it's a little bit more rote. I feel like Birmingham has more scope for being a little bit more dynamic with your strategy during the game. Perhaps it just opens a little bit more doors, and it depends a little bit more on what other people are doing. Whereas I think Lancashire, and I've hardly played either extensively. I've got a number of plays with both. And I'd say I've played Birmingham more actually now, but Lancashire also. I do think Lancashire it's more cutthroat. Like if you've played it, you're more likely to do well at Lancashire if you've played it a lot. Like it's just it's got more of that sort of cutthroat skill curve, but it's also faster and simpler.
Yeah, that was the big news for today. But still many other things to be looking forward to. So. One game announced in the last couple of weeks is Ringyo. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It is the new Paverson game, and it is set during the Edo period of Japan. You play as the daimyo, overseeing a provincial province, but you got to chop down all the trees. The whole game is about the trees, as far as I can tell. This was prototyped at the expo on the Sunday. If you showed up first thing, you could have got signed up. I was there, but I already had some demos booked in. I missed the very first game of it, and then I couldn't really commit to a later time in the day, so not played it, but this was pre any kind of art, it was all very prototype parts showing up there. Mm-hmm. So Paverson Games, of course, having done Distilled and Luthier, or Luthier. Do they have another new one?
Not that I'm aware of.
Cocktails, well, maybe it is just Ringyo. They've got, of course, the Distilled expansions coming at some point. And this game is about chopping down trees, as far as I could tell, and as far as I seen when it was set up. And I think it was demoed at Gen Con as well, but announced the name of it, and they've put in what it's about. It's got bidding, worker placement, action selection. Although, interestingly, since we're on the topic anyway, using their skilled forestry samurai, players may choose to cut down any of the 4 different tree types found on the landscape, is in the description. Forestry samurai weren't a thing.
Is that not
they
a real thing? They
definitely weren't going around chopping down trees. That was not a samurai thing to be done. They may be educated in calligraphy. They may be educated in other scholarly pursuits in addition to being their warrior duties. But they definitely didn't go around chopping down trees. Unless anybody knows more about it than me. But it just seems like they've used the name samurai without real context. And since we're on the topic, I'll look into that a bit further.
Accuracy.
Yeah, of historical accuracy.
So this does say it's about sustainable forestry. So maybe the samurai were there to make sure that the people didn't chop down the wrong trees?
It could be that they were in charge of the people chopping down the trees. That's potentially, the enforcer role, the police role, was something they might do. But I have read the Hagakura and the Book of the Samurai, and there's definitely nothing about forestry in there.
Was there anything interesting that you can share with us? Share with the class?
I don't know what I've shared before in the past. I use a couple of teachings from it in the day-to-day. It's not quite, Sun Tzu's Art of War, but one of the things I take with me is there's a passage on samurai. It's raining, and samurai just kind of walk through the streets, accepting the rain, whereas other people like dashing underneath the eaves of houses, and they're like, "Well, you're going to get wet anyway, so you might as well accepting the status of things is kind of what that passage is getting at, and understanding that you may have to go through some, not that getting rained on is the worst hardship in the world, but accepting that you're going to get to the same place as these people, you're probably both going to be equally wet, but your outlook on it is, fine, I accept this, rather than trying to avoid it and still having the same result. So,
well, we're both wet, but I'm not out of breath.
yeah. And I've actually, the reason I think about it a lot is because of the science. So I'm thinking, imagine sheet rain, right? So it's all coming down. If you're running through the rain, are you getting hit by more water because you're covering a greater distance in a shorter time frame than somebody that's just walking at a normal speed? So I don't think that was actually part of the discussion. But
But they might have had good scientific instincts. Maybe that's why they were in charge of sustainable forestry.
Could well be. Could well be.
But I like simultaneous worker placement. That sounds like fun. I've not seen it used too often. I like it in Trickerion. That kind of has that.
And Patterson games make good games, to my mind. Like Distilled, very solid. Luthie, very solid. I want to be interested in like this follow up and see if it's even better.
Well, I do. We've discussed Distilled before, and I've got some issues with it. I think you've got the same issues, but they're just less of an issue for you.
Yeah, I can identify the same problems. They're just less of an issue for me.
Yeah. Luthier, I actually have less issues with Luthier, although there has been mixed feedback on the dice. Specifically, the comment I made about how you could probably just ignore the dice part of the board and focus on the other areas and be fine with it if you wanted. I've been told, no, you definitely can't ignore the dice. I can only play more to verify that theory or not. Suffice to say,
some of the patrons require a performance, so you perhaps cannot ignore the dice rolling aspect of the performance.
Well, can you not take those patrons?
Possibly, but more. I don't know. I think almost every patron has a performance only, one that isn't covered by an instrument. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm not. I don't know when I said it. I don't know if I also meant that the acquiring of the performances was sufficiently simple compared to the scope of the dice game, or sufficiently. I think it's the issue people take with it is how random it feels in a game that's otherwise quite logistical, and so. I guess what I meant is maybe you can mitigate the worst of the dice part if that's your bugbear by, just going there bare bones when you need to, and hopefully it's not too random. But I can't, obviously I haven't played it for a little while. So I would need to revisit it to verify. If that's something that you'd be interested in, let me know. We can always talk a little bit more about Luthier. But either way, regardless of how you feel about the dice part of Luthier, or indeed the card draw part of making drinks in Distilled, both of which I think are quite contentious, actually. What I mean by contentious, they're a little out of place within the sort of expectations of the game. I do admire Dave Beck and Paverson for trying to do something like that, to try to do something a bit different or a little bit interesting. I, for one, like rolling dice and shuffling cards and, the luck of the draw. I was disappointed that Distilled didn't lean into it more heavily.
Yeah. So far.
Yeah. We'll have to see what Cocktails does.
But worth noting, this is designed by Charlie McCarran, so not a Dave Beck design.
That's Ringyo.
Ringyo, yeah.
Yeah, back onto Ringyo.
Yes. So this is also their first non-Dave Beck published game, so interesting to see what caught their eye, that this is what they're wanting to publish.
And just for the record, Charlie McCannon is not an unknown designer with a few other games to their name as well, but I've not played any of them.
I think I've seen Skyrockets, but I've never played it. It's a timer game, right? No, not for me.
I liked Kites. Kites was great. Anyway, I'm clearly on a tangent move, so let's move swiftly on to the next news article.
Well, more Gen Con news and things coming out of there, and the new Later Games game is Take, which Mike is going to tell us all about.
I've written 3 things. It's not on BGG yet, so how can I know anything about it? There's a page up on Kickstarter which says absolutely nothing. So all we know from looking at the art is that this is about some thieves fleeing from a cop. So maybe it's a heist game?
Yeah, there's one piece of art. That one piece of art was on a banner at Gen Con, and it's the one piece of art that currently on the Kickstarter page, heavily advertised from the studio that brought you Root and Arcs. We're telling you nothing else.
Yeah. And I'm interested that they wrote Studio as well. So I guess this isn't a Cole Whirler game. Can't tell. I mean, it's clearly Kyle Ferrin art. People love Kyle Ferrin. who did the art for Arcs and Root. But is it Qwirkle? I don't know, because I would have thought they would have put from the designer of Roots and Arcs.
Mm-hmm. I would think not as well, for the same reason.
But maybe it is, or maybe it's co-design.
I mean, I don't know if it'll be the same. If they're leaning into the Roots and Arcs aspect of the studio, it could be another game where one side's the cops, one side's the robbers. There'll be somebody in there that's the security system to mess things up for both sides.
Mean like
asymmetry?
Right, but because like obviously Root is asymmetrical. Arcs is not super asymmetrical. I mean, it becomes more asymmetrical as the game goes on because of the guild cards, but they change hands a lot. Actually, I think Arcs is a real outlier because they kicked off their whole studio with Vast, and then that became the Haunted Mansion. It's not called that. Mysterious Manor. So that was the other one, and those are both, of course, designs by Patrick Leader. Yeah, Patrick Leader, and hugely asymmetrical, but like even more asymmetrical than Root, because Root has those like sort of baseline rules that are kind of the same for everyone. Like everyone has some troops and sort of builds buildings, and you kill a token, you get a point, and you move around the clearings in the same way. So it's got these sort of like underpinning core rules that every faction has in common. Whereas like Vast and the Mysterious Manor are completely asymmetrical. Like each faction is a little mini game that's totally different. And Patrick said that he's not going to go back to those designs, or at least until he comes up with some new way to make them more interesting. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Maybe Take then is the third in the series. I don't think so, though. I mean, it could be. Who even knows?
It could be anything at this point. We've just seen a picture.
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, it's the same kind of weight as Arcs and Root because that's what they put on the poster. It would be, because they also did like lighter stuff like Ahoy and things like that. Mm-hmm. So they've got other games they could, I mean, it might just be because those are their biggest hits.
Yeah.
But but I would be surprised if it was a lighter game, or like not a big box game. And then they're like, Root and Arcs. Anyway, either way, I'm excited to see more. Generally speaking, I find the Qwirkle games from this studio I love. I love Arcs and Root. And the Patrick Leader games I find at least interesting. I've kept my copy of Vast around because I find it interesting. Mm-hmm. Even though I can almost never get it to the table.
I played it when it came out and then never been back.
But it is interesting.
Anyway, we'll see what it is when it's out, or when further information is announced.
If you are curious, it will be coming to crowdfunding on Kickstarter, and you can sign up to be notified on Kickstarter. There's also a mailing list you can join on their website.
Now, relevant to my interests, and something I'll speak about when we talk about what we played, the Lord of the Rings Two Towers trick-taking game, another trip of the tongue named game, was announced. So this is a follow-up. So the original game, Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game, doesn't have the Lord of the Rings prefix. But now it's Lord of the Rings Two Towers trick-taking game, and one assumes Lord of the Rings The Return of the King trick-taking game may happen at some point. But this is the next set of chapters in the cooperative trick-taking game in the Lord of the Rings universe. Everybody loves Lord of the Rings. A lot of people like trick-taking games. What a combo. But this is very welcome to people that have finished the original set of games. Highly replayable. Of course, you can go back and play through any of the campaign chapters as you wish, but having more content and more cards, and adds... This new version adds a couple of extra things. I don't know 100%, the rules aren't up, but there's new tokens, which presumably will allow you to do different things with the trick.
Yeah, I mean, we got about halfway through, and I'm keen to finish it. It's hard to get together. But, I mean, not you and I.
No.
I was playing it with Mark from Noteboard Gaming. We got about halfway through. We played a few 3-player games with someone else as well. We all had a good time. I think it works great at 2-player. I also really like it at 3-player. and I'd be happy to play it at 4-player. It is, Lord of the Rings: The Crew. If you like that sort of thing, you'll like this. If you hated that, then, probably this isn't for you unless you love Lord of the Rings. But I did find halfway through that the different mechanisms they rolled out game to game remained compelling and interesting. We did find that the chapters did not necessarily escalate evenly in terms of difficulty, with some chapters proving much harder than later chapters. But that could have potentially just been the environment or the
skill issue.
Skill issue, maybe. I don't know. But that aside, I don't mind, because every time it tried to do something interesting and I had a good time. And if you do just beat the chapter really quickly, you just move on to the next one,
Yep.
I'm excited for this. Really liked it.
Yeah, I'll definitely get it, and then hopefully manage to finish both of them at some point. Now, here's one that we've been talking about for months. Podcast after podcast. The promise of something happening. And finally, it has. Twilight Imperium 4 Thunder's Edge. So this is the new expansion from Fantasy Flight Games for their Twilight Imperium 4th edition, as we're on now. And this is a box of more. So a little bit like Prophecy of the Kings, which was also more. This is the same thing. It doesn't... I'll look back to that, actually. So within this, you're going to get all 4 codexes. The codexes are little rule sets, additional races, mix up gameplay styles that have been introduced over the years since Twilight Imperium 4's publication. Everything is now going to be collated and printed. Previously, you had to print it yourself. Waste of time for me because I've actually not played any of the codexes, but I own them all, and I'm going to own them all again.
To clarify as well, the codexes also came with a lot of patches, just fixes to card text and sort of buff up some of the weaker factions and things like that. So there was a lot of good stuff in the codexes that you could use in the base game or in the Prophecy of Kings, even if you didn't use the sort of scenarios and different rule sets.
Mm-hmm. But that'll all now be published. There's going to be additional factions to play. Don't think you'll get a neutral faction as well, so there will be a little bit more plastic in there. I don't think it's heavy on the plastic, this one. And new scenarios, new tiles, not a huge number of new tiles, but enough to change things up. There's going to be an area of space that you have to fight to open up. There's a new sort of big planet instead of Mercatol Rex. There's a I forget what they've called it, but there's a new planet to kind of... Thunder's Edge, yeah, that would make sense, I guess. That's the name of the game. But at the moment, under wraps is an entirely new way to play. So this is the... What's it called?
Twilight's Fall.
Mad Mahakt King mode. Right? So it is fall mode, yeah. So Twilight's Fall mode.
Yeah, you take up the mantle of a Mad Mahakt king, building your own custom faction from scraps of interstellar civilization.
So whether or not that's going to let you mix and match tech trees, tech trees aren't hugely different between factions, but they are different enough. Whether it's going to give you a campaign proper for this, whether it mentions its own spread of unique components, making it almost an entirely new game. So you got to assume that it's not just mix and match factions.
Right.
There has to be something else to it, but they've not announced it yet, and I'm waiting for some further information about it.
Yep, they've teased that they'll be releasing more information about that in due course. For now, all we know officially is that it's with its own spread of unique faction sheets, strategy cards, and components.
Mm-hmm.
You will create your own custom faction from scraps of interstellar civilization.
But what does that mean?
Practically an entirely new game in of itself. Nobody knows what that means. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I think is quite welcome in here. There's a lot of new factions which look interesting. I like the sound of the event cards. These are just cards that I believe you just agree to use a set of them at the beginning of the game, and then they just fundamentally change the way things work. Some of them are hugely consequential. They can change. One of them just lets you score multiple objectives in the objective round, which is huge. Like, it doesn't sound like a big change, but it is. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there. I liked the one that made fighting more productive.
Yeah, you get victory points for fights.
I'm excited by this. I've probably not yet played enough Twilight Imperium to really justify my excitement, but I am excited. I'm also pleased that Fantasy Flight have released a board game. That just makes me happy. And, for those of you
in 2025.
Yeah. This is it. After this, Fantasy Flight, shut up. But I mean, I would prefer they stayed open and kept making games. I'm just saying, that's my guess. As my day's done with FFG now, this is their last hurrah. But if you were sitting there going, well, I don't like Twilight Imperium, I just like Twilight Inscription, which is the roll and write version, and that's got all the factions in it, and now it doesn't because there's new factions. Don't worry, they've got you covered. The Twilight Inscription variations of the new factions are also in the box. So you can get them and put them into your Twilight Inscription. Think of it as a tiny little mini expansion that costs $130.
The Twilight Inscription factions will be available for download.
Oh, brilliant. So you don't have to buy it unless you really want the cards. But maybe if you've got a friend who bought it and they don't like Twilight Inscription, they'll just give them to you.
Let me know.
Yeah, Barry's got one set going.
Yeah, I don't have Twilight Inscription. Never played it. Don't think I ever will. Other games that have caught my eye. So I'm a big fan of Qwirkle. I think Qwirkle is a great game. Super easy. You're up and running in a minute. Easy to teach to anybody. Everybody gets it. Everybody likes getting involved. Scrabble, but with shapes and colours. There's a new version, which is Qwirkle Flex. This was limited to... there's hold-ups with the current tariffs, so they couldn't really get them into Gen Con, but there's 100 copies available at Gen Con for people. Should be at Essen. Hoping it'd be at Essen. And the difference in this game is you can now score on diagonals as well as the orthogonals. So some of the tiles are white, some are half white, half black, split diagonally, and if you can now look to make matching sets on diagonals as well as the orthogonals. So doesn't change too much. I will say other variants of Qwirkle are bad. Qwirkle cubes is bad. Qwirkle cards is just rummy or rummy cube. But Qwirkle itself is underrated. One of the few games that I have rated higher than the average on Board Game Geek. I don't know what else you'd want from the game, is the thing. Like it does what it does, and it does it well.
I was just sitting there thinking the one thing I'd want from Qwirkle is to be able to score in the diagonals.
And now the possibility is with you. A better box, a better insert. And then otherwise, looking at sort of crowdfunding, I've seen nothing. I think it's a quiet month.
It's really interesting that you wrote All Quiet on the crowdfunding, because I get exactly the vibe you're talking about, but it's not because I haven't seen anything. I'm on so many mailing lists and stuff now, and there's loads of stuff launching, but it all seems to be some just ridiculously bloated, overwrought, passion project from some group I've never heard of. And so I've largely ignored it. I appreciate that if you're out there trying to get your passion project realized, then this is a pity. But I think this is my own reaction to just how bloated and overproduced Kickstarters have become. And when I look at it and I just see this bloated thing that appears to be that way, I'm just like, I can't, I don't have any real interest in this. I need you to sell me on something. And they've got the marketing blurb down really well as well. It's like, what I mean is it's pure marketing speak. And I just switch off immediately. This is an innovative take on 4X, dynamic new mechanisms, never before seen use of deck building or something. And I'm just like, brrr. And I don't know necessarily how you get around that.
No, you got to try and tell people what your game's about, but
yeah,
there was actually an interesting article from Ignacy And they, what did they just publish?
Portal.
Yeah. But anyway, the instead of the pitch being this is an out of a 4x never before seen thing, just talks you through a round, like, here's why this is fun, here's why this is thematic, here's what you're doing. So that's what you need to be showing people, really.
Is it their new Artisans game?
Yes, Bohemians, that's it, yeah.
Bohemians, yeah, I demoed that. It was fun. It's really fun.
So the normal pitch is, this is what this game is, it's a worker placement, this kind of thing. None of that. The pitch was, okay, so you've got your 4 actions. Your first action is in the morning, then you go into the afternoon, and then it's the evening. One of those actions has to be work, because you need a job. But if you don't have a job, you'll just get a hardship card, because you're a bohemian, you don't care. You won't have your dinner that night. And just went through a round, and it was interesting why Portal picked it up and developed it further, rather than the usual pitches. So maybe that's something people pitching their crowdfunding, their Kickstarters, need to be aware of as well now.
Well, I don't know if the sort of the shift in, I don't know if Kickstarter fatigue is something that's pervasive, or if it's just me, but I, for one, I'm very fatigued by Kickstarter, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a game later on, actually, that I kickstarted and I'm extremely happy with. And it's not got miniatures, it's not got expansions, it's not got printed card sleeves or play mats or any of that.
Sounds awful.
And part of me would just like, I mean, and it's also a bit on me, right? Like, I don't need to buy any of that stuff. I could just buy the core game. But part of me sees all of that stuff and I get suspicious. And I think, again, this might just be a me problem, but I see all of that stuff and I'm like, yeah, but what's the actual game? Where's the game? And is the game going to be good without all of this overproduction?
Yeah. Well, there's nothing live at the moment, and I'm like, I need to get that.
Yeah, well, me neither. But it also, like, I think I have just been generally avoiding it because I've seen all these emails come through with, like, look at this latest big hotness, and I'm just like, no, I don't want to. You can't make me.
I refuse.
Well, hello, this is Editor Mike coming from the Editing Bay, and I just wanted to record a quick extra section after Barry and I were talking about sort of Kickstarters and crowdfunding campaigns that nothing had really grabbed us, and there were a few things I wanted to just chime in about. One, I do think it's helpful to make comparisons. I think a really good example was Legends of Void, a game with a name that is totally uninspiring and wouldn't grab me. And if I'd seen sort of pictures or anything like that, I would have largely overlooked it. And it's purely, and to be fair, I don't have it. I haven't played it. This is one that Barry picked up, and covered. We covered it on the show, of course. But, if I'd seen something like, we're going to take Terraforming Mars, we're going to set it in a fantasy setting, and we're going to sort of involve it to learn all the best lessons of Terraforming Mars and try to improve the elements that sort of let it down. Now, far be it for me to pick up what those are. I really enjoy Terraforming Mars. Downtime is a bit of an issue. Playtime can go really long, especially even with just say the colonies expansion. So if you can improve those things, great. I'm not sure if they have because I haven't played it. But, my point is, pitch me something like that, tell me what other games this is like, what's inspired you to make this, and what sort of you've learned from those lessons. If it's wholly original, that's completely fine, but I don't think anything's wholly original. Everything's inspired by something. Everything's reiterative. I think it's completely fine to cite your inspirations and then talk about what you've changed and why you've been inspired to come and change that, That, for me, is a sign that you're really interested in the hobby and you're really passionate about a specific mechanism or style of gameplay. And that's what I want to come through when I look at a Kickstarter, And instead, I just see a lot of, this is, an innovative new gameplay mechanism that's never before seen. And it's like, great, yes, but what does it do? Why is it? If it's innovative and new, brilliant. I love a novelty. As someone who's played a lot of games, a novelty is a great get for me. But I want to know what this novelty is doing, that what kind of experience I'm going to get from that, and why that's interesting. It's not just novelty for the sake of it. Anyway, so that's the first thing I just wanted to say. I feel like we talked about those for a while, but I wanted to explain a little bit why I was cool on the stuff I was looking at. Anyway, then of course, while I'm editing the podcast, they launched Blood Rage Valhalla on GameFound, and they also launched Ark Nova 3D on GameFound. So I just wanted to take a quick minute to talk about that. I've looked at the Blood Rage Valhalla campaign. I mean, this is an insta-back for me. I really like Chaos in the Old World. I really like Blood Rage. I really like all of the Pantheon series. I'll agree that they have some faults and they're not for everyone, but these games I love them. I love them all. I really think that they're all interesting. I particularly liked what Ankh did that was, interesting and different. I like the merge mechanism. I think it's really good. I hate the Pantheon expansion, so I would never play with it. So if you are looking at the new campaign, which offers all 3 of the back catalog plus the new game, you can probably skip the expansions box for, now, okay, a little bit more on that before I move into Valhalla. But it looks like the original games have been repackaged. They're calling them second editions. I can't see anything about updating or changing the rules. There is no content available for previous owners, which suggests to me this is all the stuff that existed before, but now they've just pared it down into a more reasonable storage solution. So that's fine. I was prepared to be a bit disappointed if they'd released new content or released revised rules or card text or something and hadn't made that available to people that already owned everything, just because that's me. And if there has been a sort of a revision or a patch, so to speak, I would like to have access to that. Doesn't look like that exists. Fine. Now, the way they've sort of pared it down is core box, aesthetic upgrades, gameplay upgrades. Now, that's a shame because there's going to be quite a lot of gameplay upgrades for Ankh that are worth having. I mean, it's all just broadening it. It's all just extra. With the exception of Pantheon, the Ankh gameplay expansions are all just extra monsters, extra gods, so more variety, broadening it. The Pantheon expansion adds a whole new mechanism where you can take actions to move priests around a temple and unlock asymmetrical player powers that you develop over the course of the game. And I just think it takes a sort of quick, punchy area control game and makes it way longer, and you have to look at what everyone's got going on. I would have preferred if you didn't have to buy that to get the extra content for Ankh. Now, I know people who like Ankh that say you don't even need any of that, so you could just skip the gameplay expansion for Ankh entirely and just get the core game. I don't think Ankh is the most beloved of the trilogy anyway. A lot of people found it very polarizing, but that's my sort of take on that. The others, great. Glad that's all available again. And then there's the Valhalla stuff. So they haven't released a rulebook. They haven't released a playable mod. Those are shames. Because I would love to dive into those. I'd love to play it, obviously. There is a TTS mod because they've made actual videos with the TTS mod, but they haven't released it to the public. So you can't play it. I can't play it. Sad. But it looks like the core changes are now you're in Valhalla and the board is less open, so you move around from room to room instead of teleporting to different regions. Yggdrasil has been replaced by Thor's throne room, or Odin's throne room, which is accessible from all of the rooms except one actually. And so that's sort of still there, and it's still got a big neat bonus in the middle. But there's a couple of interesting sort of nuanced changes, but I guess my takeaway at a high level is that it's still Blood Rage. There's still all the core mechanisms are there. It's card drafting, it's upgrading your clan, it's unlocking monsters. It's the 3 upgrades are more or less the same. The upgrade that let you put more figures on the board has been replaced with an upgrade that gives you glory for quests. So in the old game, quests would have set glory values, and you had an upgrade track that let you put more warriors on the board. The warrior track is gone. Everyone has the same number. Everyone can put out the same number. And now the quests that you complete will be worth more points if you've upgraded the quest points track. The other two tracks remain the same. So you can upgrade your rage tokens and your rage amount, and you can upgrade the amount of glory you get for winning the rooms, which are the regions. So, but it looks like fundamentally it's still the core thing, right? The drafting is there, the upgrading is there, all of that stuff remains the same. It's still 3 rounds. The changes, so if you didn't like Blood Rage, you're not going to like this. If you like Blood Rage, you're probably going to like this. That would be my takeaway. If you're like, well, I haven't nearly played enough Blood Rage, then you probably don't need this. I don't think it doesn't look like it's going to be a better version of Blood Rage. Now, it does look like there are some cool changes that are interesting, I think are for the better. For example, changing out the figure count, I think is better, just because everyone used to forget. It's so easy to forget that you can't put out another figure. It's like at the beginning of the game, it's like, everyone put your warriors to one side. Now, keep a pool somewhere, and when you upgrade this track, put one into the pool, and keep the rest to one side so you don't accidentally try to put them out when you can't. So it's nice so that's a sort of, I guess, a little quality of life improvement. But it was never too much of a problem. And so I feel like it might be more of a mechanical change to just maybe make questing more or less viable. I don't know, or maybe make it more of a thing you have to focus on, because quests were a great way to get points in Blood Rage, and they didn't scale. So you could always they did scale, of course, across the ages. The age 1 quests are worth less than the age 3 quests. What I mean is that there's no way to upgrade the amount of points you're getting from questing, or at least not that I recall. But the other thing about questing is that you could get multiple quests that want basically the same thing. So you could get a big bonanza if you get lucky. Of course, that was a part of the drafting. But I don't think you're going to like this if you don't like Blood Rage. One of the more interesting things that might not be super apparent is it looks like they have removed, or Eric Lang has removed the restrictions for upgrades. So now you've got all these upgrade spots, and you can kind of use them for whatever you want. The boats are gone. So the boats are gone. So it might even be actually less heavy than Blood Rage, a bit lighter, just because the whole sort of sea mechanism is missing. And Ragnarok has been replaced with the gods. So as the eras go on, gods start showing up in Valhalla. And then at the end of the era, instead of having a Ragnarok where everyone dies, you will have a fight with the gods and get points that way. So you want to try to win the rooms where the gods are. So just like in Blood Rage, where you're trying to win the different regions, in this you're going to be winning the different rooms. It's going to be the same sort of thing again, where if you win, you get to upgrade tracks. But if you didn't initiate the fight, then all you really do is functionally stop someone from winning, and then you can fight over it again later. So it's the same kind of mechanism. One of the differences here, of course, is that when you kill people, they don't go to Valhalla because you're already in Valhalla. So instead you actually get to collect their soldiers and you hand them back at the end of the era. So there might be some mechanism around gatekeeping people's soldiers. Like, if you win a battle early on and kill a bunch of them, they're not going to be able to summon any of that era, which could be problematic for them. But you might be able to develop strategies. I think you get points for holding on to other people's soldiers or things like that. And then the other thing is that the spaces are gone. So in Blood Rage, most of the regions, with the exception of Yggdrasil, are capped at a certain number of spaces. And in Valhalla, it looks like the rooms aren't capped. So you can have any number of figures in a room, it seems. So that's a huge change in the dynamic. And then the other thing is that the march action lets you march into adjacent rooms, but your figures can split. So you pick one room and all your figures in that room can march to adjacent rooms. So that's a bit interesting. It makes the board a little bit more spatial. The board feels more like the Chaos in the Old World board, which had, aesthetically had regions like the original Blood Rage, but you had to move to adjacent regions, which is a bit like moving to adjacent rooms. Additionally, those regions didn't have a population cap just like this. So it almost feels like he's taken a sort of smaller version of the Chaos in the Old World board and applied it to this. Now, unlike Chaos in the Old World, you don't play cards into the rooms or anything like that. So the rooms are only going to change when gods appear, and you're going to know where those gods are going to appear in future eras, and you're going to know which gods are going to appear as well, and you get points for defeating those gods if you are in the room at the end of the era. So that's all very interesting. That's about all I got out of it for the moment. There is a few other minor things, like you've got, I think, 6 warriors and 2 elite warriors. and the only distinction is that the elites can be given powers through upgrade cards, and the rest of it all looks either still to be revealed or, kind of the same as Blood Rage. Anyway, I'm mad excited for this. I love Blood Rage. I'm more than happy to just have a variant of Blood Rage in my collection. I do think probably if you're a more reasonable person, you might want to pick one. I don't think one is better than the other. I obviously won't be able to say for certain until I have Valhalla and have played it, but I don't think if you've got one that you're necessarily going to miss out with the other, unless you just really, really like this style of game, in which case, if you need another one or not. But I'm super excited for Blood Rage Valhalla, and I'm definitely going to be backing it just because I love these games. I love Chaos in the Old World and Blood Rage. So Kekpop Spiel have also launched a 3-edition version of Ark Nova. Now, so first start, Ark Nova. You know whether you like Ark Nova. If you've never played Ark Nova, you can kind of switch off. You don't really need to listen to this. This is like the 3D tiles for terraforming Mars. It's pure aesthetics. There's like one card. There's one card in here that is actual gameplay. And if Barry actually liked Ark Nova, Barry might be in a tough position. Does Barry back a very expensive product to get one card? However, Barry doesn't like Ark Nova, so Barry doesn't need to worry about that. Now, Kekpop Spiel is a new company that's been set up by Matthias Wig, who is the designer of the game. It seems just to make this product for Ark Nova. Now, the company says it's going to make cool game accessories for more games, and we'll see what happens with that. I don't know. But, of course, that's interesting because Ark Nova is Matthias Wig is a German designer. Ark Nova was originally published by Spiel, who we were talking about earlier in relation to the Kickstarter campaign for the Danes, or the crowdfunding campaign that's planned for the Danes. So obviously Fureland could have run this, I guess, but maybe they didn't want to do accessories, or Matthias wanted to hold on to this or use it to launch their own company. I don't know. But it just kind of, it further reinforces this idea that I don't know Fureland to run crowdfunding campaigns. So it's really interesting that they're sort of dipping their toe into that arena with the Danes. But back to 3 edition. It's purely 3D tokens to replace the stuff in Ark Nova. In many ways, if you've looked at the acrylic tiles from the Castles of Burgundy or Puerto Rico special edition campaigns on GameFound from Awakened Realms, you'll kind of have a sense of what this is. Like, there is a set of acrylic tiles that can replace the tiles in the game. There's a set of fully 3D tiles that can replace the tiles in the game. There's even an upgrade to put little fences on there as well. I don't think you'd need both the acrylic tiles and the 3D tiles, but of course that's a personal choice. It's up to you. When you bought Castles of Burgundy Special Edition, maybe you decided that you wanted both options as well. But you can get both. There is a pledge option for both. It's like 225 euros, so it's really expensive. But you will also get a big box to hold everything in and some upgraded player boards that are dual layer now, which is nice, actually. Those are going to be helpful. And some metal money. There's also some play mats available. I don't know if they fit in the box, so definitely check that out if that's a concern for you. And there are, cheaper versions. You can get all the acrylic tiles for 85 euros, and it's worth noting, because you have to put cubes on the tiles, that actually the acrylic tiles have holes in for the cubes, because balancing a cube on an acrylic tile might otherwise be quite difficult. There is some little fences that go on. I'm not entirely sure how they relate to the game mechanisms, but it looks really nice. Like, if you play enough Ark Nova, and what's nice actually is they've done some colored plastic as well, so it's not a bunch of gray things. It's actually got colored tiles and things for the game, so you don't need to paint it. You can, and there's some nice examples of these being painted. You don't need to paint it, so you can get all of the 3D stuff for 125 euros. You can get all the acrylic stuff for 85 euros. You can get everything for 260 euros. That comes with the metal money and the playmats as well. And you can pick and sort of choose what you want as well. And it's worth noting, I suppose, that there's also some art sleeves along with this that are available, but the only actual new gameplay element at all is a single card and building that comes with it called the Arcade. So that's €5 or free if you followed the campaign prior to this. So, like, you know, there's not any new gameplay here. And it, of course, it accommodates the expansion as well. I've forgotten what it's called, Aqua Animals or the Water Park or whatever it was called. But it accommodates that too. So that's nice. Anyway, this is purely aesthetic. So you know if you play enough Ark Nova to want to pick this up, or, you know, if you're quite content with all the cardboard pieces that it's already got. But we won't get into an Ark Nova review unless you're interested in hearing our thoughts. You know, I know Barry doesn't like it. I like Ark Nova, but I'd never played it more than 2. It's just got too much downtime. It's a bit too much random, but I do enjoy playing it. I might play it at 3 if people were really across it and knew the rules well, but I don't think I'm going to get, you know, with Ark Nova, I don't feel like I get much more out of a 3-player game than a 2-player game anyway, just because it does feel like, for me, quite a sort of solo-oriented tableau builder. You know, most of the competition is for marketplaces and first come, first served objectives, but if I wanted a contentious tableau building game, I might look to other options instead. You know, and actually Wondrous Creatures that came out that we talked about was great because it had this sort of worker placement positioning on a board that was really nice as well as a marketplace. But, you know, I like Ark Nova well enough. I'm probably not going to pick this up. But anyway, back to the rest of the show. Editor Mike is done. But one last news article. Oh, sad. It's another sad one. Oh, no, we've got 2, actually.
Yeah, but they're related.
They are related. Okay, so we're going to get back into now the board game publishers who have messed up and have tried to make amends. So if you're not interested in this, you can find all the time codes down in the description. Devere finally published a game that you've been waiting for.
Correct.
Womp womp.
Yeah. Oh well, maybe next time. Nice. Ace of Spades was a game I've mentioned a couple of times on previous podcasts. I was hoping it would be at the Games Expo, at least for demoing, but they weren't able to get a copy. And they've since managed to get it to Gen Con and released it. It has received a number of favourable reviews. The gameplay seems to be okay. However, for whatever reason, it managed to get published with a number of inappropriate illustrations, is the word used there.
Did you get a chance to see these?
Yes, they're awful. Like when I saw it, I was borderline shocked. Yeah. In terms of what was there, it's like, because it was also fine. So the game Ace of Spades draws heavily upon the Old West and sort of, particularly the movies that depict the Old West growing up from older films, you know, 60s, 70s, and to present day kind of thing. But in this, they have drawn, there's a couple of enemies, one of which is a black person in a state of enslavement, as put there, and another of the enslaver, right? So the plantation owner type thing, with a whip in hand and chains surrounding them. There's caricature style images of Native Americans there and Mexicans, or South Americans at least, and it's drawn in a style that to me was very evocative of art that was deliberately made to demonize and vilify these characters or these people by those who wanted to oppress and demonize them, right, to keep people as slaves. Now, how that got through as many people as it did to be published is the question. However, the issue is that, and at least in this instance, Devere came out pretty much the next day with an apology and what they were going to do, which is in stark contrast to CGE, which we'll look back into at the end. I presume you've seen the images as well.
Yeah.
It was. How did anybody think this was okay?
Yeah, and I think it's on Devere for sure. It's on Devere. It's completely unjustifiable. It's also on content creators who previewed this. Like, if you saw people previewing this and they didn't talk about this, that's awful. And you should let them know that you're disappointed about that. I mean, if it's one card and maybe they don't see it, I understand how reviewers have to play games really, really quick. But this is a small box game, and you'll see a lot of these cards in the game. It's not like a big bloated Kickstarter where it could easily be in a card in a tuck box or an expansion somewhere that they never saw. Like,
Yeah. I mean, certainly you won't have seen every card in every game. And if you only played it 2-3 times, it's feasible that you didn't see some of the worst offenders.
Yeah.
But if I'm playing a game, I'm probably at the end of 2 or 3 games flipping the cards over to see what's there. I want to know, okay, well, that's cool. I've seen this. Is there still more to get out of this game? Whatever. Look through the villain deck and see kind of what's there. And they're so egregious that I can't think that anybody could see them and gloss over them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you saw them at all, I feel like it would have made you take a step back. So, yes, potentially those that have reviewed it, and as I mentioned, reviewed it favourably, should almost have certainly highlighted the problems, and almost none did.
Yeah, it's weird how it had to come out in retail for this to become known. And, that doesn't help the publisher either. If you're a content creator out there and you looked at this and you just didn't say anything, well, now they're going to stop the sales of the games, retrieve all the copies that were sent to retailers, and design all new replacement cards.
Yeah.
Those are 2 of the 8 bullet points they've outlined of remedial steps.
Yeah, to their credit, they said, yeah, absolutely, we've messed up here. We will recall all the product. Anybody that's ended up with the product can get the replacement cards free of charge. They've apologised, and they've taken down all their social media. Everything surrounding the game has been removed, and they're putting in place measures to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Now, again, it definitely shouldn't have happened in the first place, and I'm convinced that a conversation did happen, because the worst one, the fugitive, is called the fugitive and not the slave.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to play devil's advocate or defend Devere. If I were to try and explain that mystery, they've justified it as saying it's Django from the film Django Unchained, yes. Right? And is he a fugitive in that game? Well, in that film, but that's because he escapes a plantation, right? And that makes him a fugitive. So fugitive in this context is the exact same as escaped slave. So why pick the less descriptive term? And the thing is, he's wearing ankle irons, right? Like broken ankle irons.
Yeah, and again, the style of it. I know the designer very much admires the artist. He mentioned in some of the development blogs how pleased they were to be working with the artist, and the artist has a style. However, used with the caricatures of these sort of nations and these peoples, it comes across as very racist, for want of another word, to be honest. I don't think I have another word for it. I don't think anybody would be happy with that depiction of anybody. So anyway, but as I say, to their credit, they've taken it, they've recalled everything, they're going to replace it, they're going to put measures in to fix it, and that came out pretty much the next day from Devere, once the issue became highlighted on the forums, as you say, from retail customers.
I'm conscious that I've got their whole community post up here in the show notes. I will try to find a link online so I can put that down there. I won't read you the whole thing because it's quite long, but it is exactly the kind of apology you'd want. They've outlined what the issue was, they've taken responsibility for it, and then they've outlined what they're going to do about it, right? So it's pretty good. The one thing I would pick up is that it does seem to specifically highlight the plantation owner and slave card as the problem.
No, they've addressed that. They are fixing the other ones.
Oh, okay, great. Perfect. I mean, better that these things didn't happen at all, but at least when they do happen, they're showing, the appropriate contrition.
Yeah. And this is in stark contrast to what we mentioned in the last episode for CGE and the Hogwarts code names. At the time, CGE hadn't responded. They have now, and their response is more measured, shall we say, and still avoids kind of taking any responsibility to it. So they are not pulling the game, but instead they will be donating 100% of the profits to pro-trans charities. As we mentioned in the last one, anything that goes into J.K. Rowling's, the last podcast, sorry, anything that goes into J.K. Rowling's pockets can be used to fund her political agenda, and that actively harming people who are trans, particularly in the UK, but that filters out potentially globally. CGE, in their update and what they're going to do, still avoid mentioning the IP at all, and avoid mentioning what the issue is at all. And I suspect that's because there's an ironclad non-disparagement clause in it, and I think they have to release the game, having signed up for it, and I think they can't say anything bad about the Rowling estate or the Harry Potter IP. So whilst their hands may be a bit more bound, and what they're doing isn't perhaps what most people wanted, which would be to stop publishing the game, they have at least tried to counteract the effects of publishing the game by putting profits into the other side and the pro-trans charities. And perhaps we'll find that statement as well and link to it. You can make your own mind up on that one. They're obviously never going to come out and say, well, actually, we can't not publish it and we can't say anything bad about J.K. Rowling herself. And so that is what it is. So Devere have certainly gone much further, but at least CGE has done something now in response.
This mistake on this, I mean, the mistake in both cases is entirely owned by the publisher, but of course in this case there's a lot of legal framework complicating things. I did, after we discussed this on the last podcast, sort of go away and read a lot more about this, specifically Rowling and her sort of efforts to what I suppose she would describe as defending women's rights. And it's pretty awful. Like it's pretty unforgivable, honestly, and completely misguided. So I can completely understand why people are so upset about this. I don't really think they can fix this. They're trying their best. Maybe they're trying their best. We'll never know because we don't really know the ins and outs of everything behind the scenes. I suppose, at the very least, hopefully this will be the end of the collaboration. And, one of the things that really annoyed me about this is I'm just going to get up on a hill here and maybe I'll die on this hill, but that's fine. It's just the number of people going, well, don't review bomb it on BGG. Let's be reasonable. Yeah, I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, that's the least harmful action people can possibly take is to just give it a bad rating. Like it's so benign, and somehow that's the thing that annoyed people. They're like, well, the game might be good. And it's like, listen, okay, you cannot possibly start to, put a series of rules on what people can and can't, or what can and can't influence, people's, BGG already does a pretty good guideline, which is 10 is like, I'm going to keep it forever and I'll always play it. 1 is I'd never play this or I'd never play it again, and then everything else is something in the middle, like 5 or 6 is, I'd play it if someone suggested it, but I wouldn't really be excited about it. Right. And that's the most definition they've given to the numerical values. And you can't have any more than that. We can't have more criteria because, for everyone who's out there saying, yeah, but rate the game based on its mechanisms, there's people who play games because they like art or theme, Yeah. And I do think it's very reductive to try to enforce on people this idea of only reviewing games if you like the mechanisms, Like there are some games that are very non-mechanical, like, does that mean we can't review, like social deduction games? So it's just mind-blowing to me that, and also, like, if a game has got this kind of social context, I think you're absolutely in your rights to say, I'd never play that, I'm rating it a 1. Even if the mechanisms are good, it doesn't matter. The mechanisms don't matter at that point. It's the same way if the game has a theme that you find completely off-putting, and you're just like, I have a friend who wouldn't play games where he plays a criminal because he just finds the idea of being a criminal distasteful. And I would expect him to rate games where he plays a criminal a 1, if he bothered to rate them at all. However, in his case, I don't see the need for him to rate those games because, like, they're just not in his sphere of attention. But this is, you can't prescribe how people should rate games. And this is the least costly action people can take, And if you want to go out there and rate things a 10 to offset the balance or whatever, you do you. But it's just mind-blowing to me that there's this sort of purity around reviewing games on BGG that just people have decided should completely omit any kind of context at all for the game, including its art and theme, beyond just its mechanisms. It's wild. Anyway, that's the hill. I'm prepared to die on it. Feel free to leave your comments or send emails. I will read them, but I probably won't respond to them.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of wrap us up on this one, I looked at how many sort of Harry Potter games have been published in the last couple of years, and actually there's not many. There's only a couple from last year, and one of them was Monopoly. But I think, if anything, people were complaining, well, why don't you boycott this, or why don't you, bit of whataboutisms coming through to it, and the answer to that is, well, maybe we should, and maybe we'll start doing that more and more now. And I think publishers in general need to take a closer look at who publishers are working with. I fully expect people to come at Hasbro and Wizards next, in the next few months, if they announce their next Universes Beyond set is Harry Potter, right? Which, don't ask me why I'm thinking that, but they're very strong signals that Harry Potter is going to be the next Universes Beyond set coming out of Magic. So, will people react in the same way? You have a lot of people that don't care and only care about the things they like and don't care about anything else, and they're probably the majority. And will people be up in arms about it the same way? Is the sort of question coming into it. So I also maybe need to have a look at my own collection. I've pre-ordered Puerto Rico, which has a checkered history. With the last version, of course, they did have, I forget the guy's name, but, and then he was excluded
Jason.
from the Awakened Realms one. Jason, yeah. Who brought to light more of the good parts of Puerto Rico's history and the Puerto Rican people being put into the game. And so hopefully this, the Awakened Realms version continues that sensitivity there. I own Santa Maria, which I can't really take seriously because of the little smiley face tokens that are used to represent the indigenous peoples who are being colonized.
Yeah.
I do need to have a look at Saltfjord because the expansions for Santa Maria don't add anything either. So if Saltfjord's kind of a straight up replacement for Santa Maria, I might consider that. And then coincidentally, I was looking through my games. I have Incursion, and there's a dominatrix Nazi on one of the boxes, and she's one of the characters in the game that you can play as. Is that, we've not really even spoke about playing the bad guys in the war games, but is that something that is making light, the weird World War setting? Is that something that makes light of actual atrocities that did occur during the war? So I mentioned at the top, I think my threshold's probably willful misrepresentation in a game. I have a number of games like Endeavour has slavery. Eventually you hope to get rid of it during the game. Kemet has, or at least had, slaves propping up your pyramids. Lewis and Clark, which we spoke about last podcast, glosses over the impact that Lewis and Clark had on the native populations and also slavery. But, you know, in those games, the people that are being oppressed are not being portrayed in a negative light, and they're not glorifying these people in a way that is beyond you're playing as them. But maybe that's enough. I don't know. I need to have a sit down and think.
You know, I do think about one of the reasons we sort of struggle with this, you know, and I'm speaking for you. So if you disagree, you're more than welcome to jump in. But, you know, I too have quite a high tolerance for, you know, sort of even the funification of awful situations, you know. And so I try to be more conscious of it, and then, you know, perhaps I don't want that. And what I don't want is for that to lead to, you know, an over concern, you know. And so to an extent, I think you have to let people be, you know, people who are most affected be the guide on this, you know, like it is, if somebody says, you know, hey, that's, you know, affected me in a really negative way and I don't like it, you got to take that concern seriously and, you know, give them space to voice it without challenging them and going, hey, you know, it's just a bit of fun, you know, or whatever. Don't be so serious, or don't be such a killjoy, because it's also like not their job to educate you. You know, if you don't understand why something's problematic and someone brings it up, it's kind of your job to go away and learn about why they had that reaction to this thing, you know? And so, you know, and maybe you think that that's completely legitimate and maybe you don't. However, you know, it's not also really your position to judge other people's emotional responses. They've had that. Even if, you know, for whatever reason, like, you know, you're trying to create a fun environment. And so all we can really do is be on our best sort of conscientiousness when bringing these things out, you know, like Age of Discovery, the Glenn Drover game I mentioned earlier, which absolutely has you murdering Native Americans in it, is got a really great worker placement system, and it's not well reiterated anywhere else. It was actually originally Age of Empires 3, the board game, and then they lost the license and made this instead. Nothing like Age of Empires, the video game. Age of Empires 3, the video game. But, you know, I would never, ever, ever, ever bring it to the table, because it's also best at 5. So it wants like 5 players. I'd never bring it to the table without saying to everybody, like, look, we're going to play as awful Age of Discovery colonialists. We're going to go over to the New World and we're going to murder a bunch of Native Americans. And it's pretty rough. The game is fun if that doesn't upset you to the point where you can't enjoy it. And I'm not going to judge you if you're not, you know, too overcome emotionally to play a game, but I'm not going to judge you if you are. You know, I'm just going to try to be completely understanding and as communicative as I can. And, you know, when people come out and just, you know, like if there was a new version of this game that used the exact same, well, actually, do you know what? There was actually another game from Glenn Drover. I can't remember what it's called. He said it in space. It's the same game in space, but he changed a bunch of things and it's bad now, you know? And it's such a shame, because it's like, I want to play this. I'd rather play the space version if I could, but he ruined the game. So now I can't. I have to play this version. But yeah, it's complicated. It's difficult landscape to navigate. And I think at the end of the day, what we all really need is to show just a lot more sensitivity and, you know, accountability as well, especially when we're on the side of people who are not necessarily affected by these things, or not as affected, you know, just, you know, so it shows some empathy and some understanding.
Yep.
But I'd never advocate for sort of whitewashing things either, you know, or that is to say, just removing the historical context. Like, if they took out the part of Age of Discovery where we didn't now have Native Americans in the New World, you know, and they were just like, there's some like wild beasts you have to fight when you get there, and that's why you need soldiers. I'd be like, well, this is actually worse now. So there's not a win-win scenario. And maybe the answer is, if you're making a really fun, lighthearted product, just don't set it during a really problematic historical period. I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like historic games can be...
Well, they must be inherently...
Acknowledge what went on, right? And it doesn't have to be couched in apologies for doing so. It just has to be, this is what happened. We're simulating elements of that era and of this conflict and or of whatever it is. But we acknowledge how awful it was, you know?
And, you know, there's this idea of Puerto Rico, 18, I'm going to get the date wrong, 18 something something. The one that Jason consulted on. Jason's a Puerto Rican who helped them just shift the time period so that instead of the imperial, instead of the European colonialists building the plantations and running all the plantations, it was after they had vacated Puerto Rico and the plantations went back into the hands of the native populations and they were running them now. And so you're playing basically the same game, but you're playing as the natives building businesses instead of colonists building plantations. And, you know, that I guess now it's more palatable, and if there's an opportunity in there to educate around Puerto Rico's history and sort of how these things came to pass, I think that's a great approach, and I really encourage more of that sort of thing.
But yes, the news and philosophies. Ready Steady Podcast.
I just came here to learn about fun games, man. I just want to talk I just want to roll some dice and have some fun.
Not round these parts. Well, we have been rolling some dice and having some fun.
Barry's going to mention now some older games, which I think are worth mentioning because it turns out that even though they might be more than a year or two old, they can still be fun.
Doesn't make sense. I don't understand, but yes, that is very true. Imagine playing the games on your shelves instead of just buying one, playing one, putting it up on the shelf.
Imagine playing for a second or third time something you've already played.
Inconceivable. But that is what I have been doing. So, a couple of older games on games that I've played before. I thought worth mentioning. Rajas of the Ganges, still a great game. Chuck some dice, play some workers. The competition aspect's great. I've played enough of it now that you can come up with a little bit of a strategy. Trying to get that extra worker in the first round is really hard. People managed to stop me doing that. I was gutted. I was this close. One more action, and I nearly got enough money to get a worker turn one. I was like, this brilliant action economy is going to be great. And then they stopped me. Curses. And I didn't get as much of an advantage as I hoped. But great game. A lot of fun. Played with new players and players that played before. Everybody had a good time.
Yeah, I too have Rajas and also rate it very highly. So if you're into Euro-style games and you like worker placement, do you ever roll the dice, or they're just tracking?
You roll the dice when you get them, and then they become that value of resource.
And then you can do something about the numbers, right?
Yeah, you've got your karma. You can flip the dice, but typically you can go to a slot where you can trade your dice in for new dice and get new rolls. Or you can just get a new dice. So, but there's always something to spend it on. Not just high numbers are good. You need low numbers for the shipping track. You can spend low numbers on gaining income. You can spend low numbers on just going to a space.
Yep.
Depending on what you want to do.
Yep. It's a solid middleweight Euro, and I'm really pleased that I've got it.
And then I purchased a couple of apps in the last couple of weeks. One of which was I finally unlocked the expansions for Spirit Island. They were on sale on Steam, so I was like, you know what? Yeah, I want to play more Spirit Island. I don't always want to set it up. What if I got the bits that are missing? Because you can't really play Spirit Island without Jagged Earth and Branching Claw, if you ask me. But I know
Branching
some
Claw
people
certainly feels like it was removed after the fact.
And what I have discovered from playing is that I only like Spirit Island when I can cheat. So the app, of course, does not allow me to do the kind of take... But that's not true. The app will allow me to do unlimited takebacks. So if you see some new information, the app will let you do it. But you have to tick an option to say that you want to do that. And you disable all the achievements and things you can unlock. So I've not done it. And what I found is when I go into the slow part of the game, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't do what I thought it did, I can no longer just switch it out for a card from my hand that would let me do what I wanted to do from having misread it. So so it's back to the old tabletop version of Spirit Island for me in order to go back to cheating.
I adore that they've got like a cheater mode and they're like, you can activate this, but we see you and you can't have any of our coveted achievements. That's so funny.
It's not like I'm cheating, right? It's not like what's happened has changed what I want to do. Just when something has gone wrong because I've chosen wrong and I could have seen it if I just wasn't so stupid. I just want to be able to switch it.
Well,
that's
now,
what the fun is.
I think we could probably get into a whole debate around whether or not part of the skill of the game is foreseeing the outcomes of the system. Well, I would argue certainly up until Jagged Earth, which introduces the event deck, because that always reveals something new in the invader phase. So arguably, you shouldn't be able to swap out your slow powers at that point because you've seen an event that you wouldn't have known about.
Correct. Things change, and if that means that you can no longer do what you wanted to do with your power, that's one thing. But if your power was never going to work in the first place because you misread the card because you're an idiot,
yes.
not naming any names, then you should be able to swap it.
Well, yes, and you know, to be fair, I don't seem to have this problem. Now, I'm pretty bad at not reading the cards properly, and usually I just have to, you know, grin and bear it because I'm playing a competitive game. I have not had that problem much in Spirit Island. But the main thing is, I've never disparaged someone for enjoying a game the way they want to enjoy it. There's not a right way to play that you must do.
Do what I want.
Yeah. And this is one of the nice things about board games is like, if you do get fail state and you do just want to keep going anyway because you're having fun, you can. Video games won't let you do that. They're mean and cold computers.
Anyway, Spirit Island's still great. I will play some more on the app, but I'll have to be more methodical about my actions, I think, rather than loosey-goosey, which is my...
is if you want those achievements and things, you have to be playing the board game and the app in tandem, so you can carry out the turn on the board game and undo it if you want, and then just input it into the app afterwards when you're happy it's working the way you want it to.
Good thinking. Yeah, I'm in. One game that's mentioned previously was Distilled, and played Distilled with the full suite of mini expansions as things stand at the moment. So no cocktails, but the variable market, the upgraded ingredient powers, and we played it 5 players. Now, it is not recommended at 5 players on Board Game Geek. Indeed, 80% of people say not recommended 5 players. And I think that's probably because of the length. I don't think it adds that much, but I think it adds enough that the game just kind of slows down a little bit. However, this was my first 5-player game, and it was also arguably my favourite game of Distilled. Going for the goals mattered. You couldn't get them all. People were vying for them. People were holding off on selling their aged alcohol until somebody else could capture it as well. They were getting more bonuses out of that. The number of labels mattered because people wanted to target specific beverages in each round because you were getting monetary bonuses for creating alcohol from those regions. The marketplace with the goods, the premium ingredients, mattered because the cost of some was up for a round and some were cheaper, and people could actually start making more interesting decisions about what they were buying and what they were selling based on what they could get for cheap and what they could sell for more. And suddenly the game came a little more, it just became a little bit more of a game. And there's a bit more competition there rather than just everybody faffing about on their own for 7 rounds.
Does it go up to 5 out the box, or do you need an expansion?
It goes up to 5 out the box. Well, at least I've got the sort of Kickstarter edition. I'm assuming that's the same as the retail. I don't think
there was any Kickstarter exclusive gameplay.
No,
I think it was all mats and maybe some promo cards and things. But
so I had a really good time at 5 player. The game was really close. I think it came down to like the last two points. I won by 2 points anyway, and my objectives at the end, I'd messed up. I'd got one of them, didn't have the other one. We were all competing for bottles. Bottles were really important because there wasn't enough to go around. So everybody's like, well, when can I buy this? The timing in the markets became important. 5 player was good, and I'll hear nothing bad about it.
Barry's happy in the contrarian 20%.
Exactly. This guy. Played more Castle Combo. We had a good time with Castle Combo, but we really need the expansion now. There's only sort of 2 key strategies that everybody wants to go for. Well, one of them is keys. So the key strategy of going for keys, and the other is filling the bags. Playing 4-player, you got 2 people going for bags, 2 people going for keys. It needs the forthcoming expansion to just be able to mess with other people's strategies a little bit, and the delayed actions on some of the cards. So they've announced what's in the new expansion, and it is not the immediate scoring when you take it, but you can delay it until it's beneficial, and you should be able to kill some more cards or discard more cards in the rows, so you can interfere with other people's strategies a little more, and I think that'll be a good shake-up. It's only like 8 cards or 16 cards or something within this mini expansion, but I think it will be good for the meta on those ones. But it's still a good game. Then, nothing much to say about it. Played more Moon Colony Bloodbath, was fun. Played some BOOoop with the ghosties. I really like the ghosties. They can just ping pieces further than you would normally be able to boop something. Good fun. The gang's still fun. Still having a good time guessing poker hands and what people have with that. I do want the mini expansion that came out in Gen Con. Hopefully managed to get hold of that. And played a little bit of Unstoppable, just solo. I don't mind the shuffling as much now. Like I've had to adapt my shuffling to, instead of holding the cards on the short end, to holding them on the long ends for shuffling, because they're different heights. You may recall from my complaints about the game in an earlier podcast that the sticky out tabs, the cards sticking out the end of sleeves, some cards not sticking out the end of sleeves, trying to shuffle them was a problem. I just dealt with it. I won 1 game, I lost 1 game. The game I won, I absolutely smashed, but I was playing on easy, and then the game I lost, I played in the hardest difficulty and just couldn't get going. So I'll maybe stick in the middle next time and see if I can find a comfortable middle ground where it's challenging but not impossible. And those were the oldies. I did play a few new to me games. Maybe I'll cover them and then I'll talk about my big one later. So games that are new to me but not necessarily new. Archaeology, the new expedition. I think this is still a few years old, but it re-implements an even older version of the game. It was fine. It is a set collection game.
I've played this. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. We had a good time. There's a number of monuments that change the game up round to round, or game to game at least. It fills a hole, but it was nothing special. If you're in desperate need of a set collection game and you like the Egyptian theme, yes. Otherwise, I'm sure you could find something more suitable for you.
Yeah, I mean, this really is the absolute definition of filler, because it's quick to play and then it's just drawing and auditing cards for 10 or 15 minutes and then it's done. Yeah. You know,
draw a card, see what you get.
I mean, case in point, Barry put it in the show notes. I'd played it before, didn't even realize till right now. I totally forgot about it.
Yeah. Very middle of the road. As part of my app buying spree, however, I also picked up One Deck Galaxy. Now, I have played a fair amount of One Deck Dungeon, particularly on the app. The app I like enough to bump the game a whole point. So for me, the game is like a 7. Happy to play it. Fun playing on your own or 2-player. The app takes that to an 8. Like being able to do the sort of pseudo campaign, upgrade your character, record all your stats for the game, really adds to it. And so I thought, well, One Deck Galaxy I know is a step up in complexity, but I didn't realise quite how disliked the game is. It is not as well received as One Deck Dungeon. So One Deck Galaxy I also do not like, and I do not want to play, be it on the app or in real life. I would hate it in real life, and I don't want to play it on the app. It is nowhere near as much fun. And that is all it really comes down to. The decisions it's broader, but it's not really the kind of broadness that I care about. It's just, well, I can't do this for ages, or I have to do this before I do this before I do this, and it takes ages to build up something, and don't bother with it. There you go.
Well, I haven't played either, but I will not bother with One Deck Galaxy then.
No, over that. And then looping back to our announcements at the top of the channel, finally played the Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game. only played it 2 players, so we had the dummy third player where you've got little pyramids and you're able to control what they do to a degree, but it worked really well. I thought 2 player was really good. I was holding off. I was waiting for 4 players because I thought that it'd be best at 4, and I thought that's really what you'd want. And I thought 2 players, I don't want to play with a dummy player. Like, it's just extra admin. It's not extra admin, it's a slightly different style of game for what you're doing, but it worked really well. I do still want to get a 4-player game in because your choices of character is very limited at 2-player.
Yep.
The chapters require a couple of characters specifically, and then the last player typically has a choice of like 2 or 3 different characters they can play. Whereas if you're only playing at 2 players, you have to be those characters. And so, we've not seen Gandalf. We've not used what's the elf's name?
Is it Gildor?
Gildor. That's it. But I said.
Yeah, Gildor.
Edit that in. Gildor.
Gildor. I guess. So, how many chapters have you played?
We're only 4 or 5 in.
So you will at some point, even in the 2-player game, get to the long
make
chapter. There are short chapters, which is what you've been doing. They are interspersed with long chapters, and in the long chapter, you actually have to cycle through and win it with every character. So you play the same chapter multiple times until you've played it. You've won it with every character.
Okay.
Not in every combination. You just have to have won it at least once with each character.
Yeah, 3 factorial. Okay, let's go. play 100 games.
Oh, it's Lord of the Rings. There's loads more characters coming. And, just like the movies, they've decided to include some characters that are not really in the books because we have because we want to try to be a bit more diverse than maybe Tolkien was in his time.
Fair.
But I love this. I love this one. Actually, when you put it in the show notes, I was like, I want to play that again.
I want to play that again. I'm going to play it now. Peace.
Is there a solo mode?
There is a solo mode, yeah. I don't know if I want to play it solo either, but I said that about 2 players, so maybe I'll give it a go and see what it's like. The rules are a bit different, though, I think. And then the final game that's definitely very old, but also new now, was Kemet. But we played Kemet 1.0, so before the revised 1.5 rules, which was fixed a lot of the problems and clarified a lot of the things, we only had the 1.0 rulebook to look at. So definitely a bit loosey-goosey is how I would describe these 1.0 rules. We did have to look up a couple of things.
Quickly clarify, Kemet, when you say Kemet 1.0, are you talking about OG Kemet or like?
We're talking OG, yeah, not Blood and Sand.
Right. So was 1.5 a revision for the OG Kemet?
Correct. Yeah.
And then Blood and Sands uses which is the new Kickstarter one from Matago, uses that 1.5 rulebook. Yes,
and then some, but like a lot of the FAQs were incorporated into 1.5 to make the game actually work the way as it was intended. So the game overall, there's a definite asterisk around the game because it wasn't super tight in terms of what you could and couldn't actually do. Do you need a person sat next to your pyramid to buy one of the cards? When's the day phase end and when's the night phase? That wasn't very clear in the original rules. So we didn't know when the actual scoring ended. It's the end of the day phase. You check for points, the number of victory points to trigger the end game condition, and you earn points for controlling temples and stuff during the night phase. But that's not delineated in the 1.0 rules. And so we're just like, well, we'll get the points, and then if we've got them, we'll end the game. But the game was still really good, right? It finished, played 5-player that. We played, game finished 11-11, 10-8-7. I had the misfortune to kingmake, fundamentally. I could have taken 2 points off any of 2 players, but both of them, the other person's going to beat me in the tie. Because I had more combat points than I did. And so it was just kind of, I'll do what I can. And so I came second, fundamentally. The game is really good at encouraging action. Like getting you out there, getting combat, interacting with other players. The movement on the board was phenomenal. Like, I just loved that you could get anywhere, pretty much. You might have to plan a little bit, but you could probably get around really easily, and you can always mess with the player that's in the lead, or the player that you want to mess with. You can kind of get in there. I took an early lead, and then I was first in every round until the end, and that sucks. Being first in Kemet sucks. And you do not want to do that. Do not take an early lead in Kemet. You'll paint a target on your back, and you'll have a terrible time for the rest of the game. I had a really good time, actually, but wasn't as smooth as it could have been. Looking at it, and looking at the new version, Blood and Sand, I don't think it's enough to be my default entities on a topographical abstraction game, but I wouldn't mind playing it a few more times, potentially with the Cyclades monsters. Who knows?
Well, they've obviously got this new edition, Blood and Sand, which I did play once when it first delivered, which was a while ago, and I really liked it. I liked OG Kemet. Now, I don't think I ever had the experience you're talking about, because when I played it, it was someone else's copy, and they were super across the rules. So either they just decided how they all worked, because it was 1.0, and they just decided, and then I never had the experience of trying to interpret the rulebook, or it was actually the 1.5 version, because I don't know the timelines. I don't know actually when we were playing in relation to when that was implemented. But
1.5's really old as well, so it was just that we had the box. None of us were really played it much. Like, one of us had played it, or a couple of us had played it once a long time ago. Trying to find a rules video for the old version, we eventually found Rodney's 1.0 description. Oh, Rodney, I understand how to open a rulebook. You don't have to explain everything. But we watched that, and then we kind of had to interpret the rest of it from the rulebook, and it was not clear. But we made the most of it, and we had a really good time. So,
well, I've got not only have I got Blood and Sand, which I did play and I did enjoy. I've also got the stupid new edition with all the dumb stuff. So now it's too big to take out my house, but maybe if I can get some people over, I'll give it a try and I'll report back.
And that is everything, well, apart from the big game. I know everybody's waiting on. Put a comment down below if you can guess what it is.
Yeah, if you've picked up from Barry's subliminal clues what game he's reviewing in this episode, you leave a comment down below. In the meantime...
I said it at the end of the last podcast, and everybody watches till the very end, surely.
In the meantime, here is one we both played very briefly, because I was like, we should play this. It's on BGA. We should cover this. We talked about it. It is the sort of introductory match for Tekken, the board game, which came out on Board Game Arena. You can go and play it. If you have a subscription, you can go try it for yourself. We talked about the Tekken, the board game crowdfunding campaign. Neither of us actually backed it, but I thought, we'll give this a try, seeing as it's available. And I don't want to assume anything. So this is designed by Lukasz Wozniak. The artist is Agata Skowronek, who did the art for The Witcher Path of Destiny, which is another game by the publisher, same publisher as this, Go On Board, which is Lukasz's company. This plays 1 to 8 players. Now, BGG says best at 2, but I'd highlight that this is not out. It is not available. So this information will come from people who've played a prototype or BGA. The playtime is 20 to 60 minutes. There's no wait yet because there's not enough votes. And this is, based on Tekken, the PlayStation game. Possibly on other platforms. I don't know. I only remember Tekken Tag from the PS3. That's the one I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
But it's, the fighting game, and the board game has you in a top-down 3D arena where your figures are moving around on hexagons, and you've got a deck of cards for each character, and you're trying to, it's like the fighting game, right? You're doing punches and kicks to your opponent, and every time you punch or kick them, they take a damage, and they've got a little life bar that looks like the one from the video game, and if it gets all the way to the end, they die and you win. And then it's best of 3, just like the video game. So you just reset and go again. And there are a few mechanisms that are obviously, trying to replicate the video game. Unfortunately, I can't draw parallels completely because I didn't play the video game. Maybe Barry can do that. I don't know if Barry knows the video game. Potentially. But at its very core, you've got a character sheet in front of you, which has 2 combos, or maybe more actually. Yours had 3, mine had 2. It's got some amount of combos on it. And you've got a deck of cards. And there's a default deck of cards that everyone gets. And they represent low, high, and mid attacks. And each mid attack does the exact same thing. Each high attack, exact same thing. Each low attack, exact same thing. Then you've got 4 cards that are unique to your character. I'm going to shuffle them in there. They're also low, mid, and high attacks, and they have some more unique elements. You're going to draw a hand of 3 cards, and then on your turn, you're going to play a card face down to your player area. And ultimately, you're going to flip it over and perform the attack on it. And the attack is on the left side of the card, and on the right side of the card, it's got some little bonuses. So the next time you play a card, when you flip it over, if the attack type matches the bonuses, you get to do your attack plus a little bonus. And if the configuration of the 2 cards matches up with one of the combos on your player board, you also get a little combo. So fundamentally, this is what you're trying to do, right? Play cards. You play 3 cards out, potentially 3 cards in a row, and match up the little icons on the left and right sides of the cards. Try to match up the configuration so you pull off a combo on your player board. Now, the twist is every time you play a card, your opponent gets to guess first before you reveal it, whether it is a mid, high, or low attack. And if they guess correctly, your turn immediately ends, and then they get to have a go. And furthermore, they get a little token that means that their first card play cannot be interrupted. So you don't get a guess for the first card they play, but then you get to guess after that. So the next card they play, you have a guess. And if you get it right, their turn ends and it's back to you and you get the little token. And this goes back and forth until someone's beaten the other person senseless.
Yeah, I mean, you've described that. It sounds all right. So the punishment mechanism, so if you successfully block, you've guessed that they're coming in for a high attack, you block that. The punishment mechanism means you get the counter punch off. So that's what that enables. You get 1 free card, 1 free action at the start of your turn. Much like the video game, once per round, so that is 1 life bar, you can activate your rage function. Your rage function means you'll become immune to that end turn guess.
That's heat.
If your opponent...
Barry. That's heat.
Pardon?
That's heat function.
Is that heat? Oh yeah, rage.
Rage is when you get low health.
Bang. The heat function enables you to continue to play even if your opponent guesses what your attack is. They do manage to block the attack, but they do not stop your turn. And then as you get low in life, the rage function enables a special power for each player. Now you get a choice of 2 at the start of the game. You can choose which one it is. So each character has a couple of options to choose from depending on what you think the matchup's best for. Do you want to be far away from your opponent, closer to your opponent? Do you have more high attack cards in your deck than low attacks? Just depends. And the game also, the arena also matters. There are a number of arenas in the full game found, the full crowdfunding version. There's only one version or a single arena on Board Game Arena, which is the Sanctum. I can't remember what it's
Subconscious.
Subconscious, and you can pummel your opponent through the ground. You flip the board over if you manage to break the ground and push them through the second arena, which is the same as the first arena, but the walls do more damage. Oh yes, you can also punch people or push people into walls to do damage, the same way as you might wall juggle in the video game. So it is a very reasonably accurate abstraction of the video game, of a sort of 3D fighting video game. It has arguably everything. But you are playing a board game, not a video game, so there's no dexterity element, and that's really why fighting games are fun. to some degree.
Well, I just on that point, I'd very quickly mention, like, you can have dexterity in board games. It is a thing. You can also have times, like cards. In fact, there's a tiny box board game called Spam, which is Mexican wrestlers, and you're trying to build a stack of cards that represent the hits you're making to your opponent, and it's all real time. So you're just playing cards into these stacks the same time your opponent's playing cards into the stacks. You have to try to card count who's playing what, so that when it's resolved at the end, the right cards are there for you. And that feels like a fighting game. Because it's real time. You're trying to act fast. You're like, do I play a card? Do I not play a card? There's 3 stacks. It's like, which stack do I go to? That feels like a fighting game, because it's real time, stressful dexterity. But the thing is, people don't really like that in board games. It's a niche genre. So it strikes me as really curious that people keep trying to adapt these games, which are fundamentally like really fast action affairs, into a turn-based board game. And you can do it accurately. Like, we could argue that the punishment mechanism is an accurate mechanical representation of what happens in the video game, just slowed down to, the opposite speed.
Yeah. The punishment mechanism's clever enough, and it means that games will end. Because either you're not getting the blocks, in which case you're taking damage, or you get the blocks and then you're guaranteed a hit. So the game, the rounds will end, and that is part of what the punishment mechanism does enable. But the fact that triggers off not necessarily a random guess, but at worst 1 in 3 chance of being able to block it is a choice.
Well, yeah, I think the thing is, like, my sort of takeaway from our play of this on BGA was that, the skill, and, we've talked about this, I think, on the podcast before, or maybe we have. I don't know actually if we talked about BattleCon, or if we talked about Sakura Arms, or if we talked about Knockdown, or any of these sort of other fighting game, things that mirror fighting games in board game format. But I think one of the things that's interesting about fighting games is, like, certainly the video games, like, everyone's played them, and realistically, like, to have fun playing them it's relatively easy. Like, you go in and you're like, oh, that's kick, that's punch, that's block. Okay, let's go. And then you and your friend are just bashing on each other, and it's quite fun. And then, there's this point where you have to decide to get good at it or not. And if somebody's much better at it, then it's a real skill game. Like, they will always win, if they're better at it. There's a real skill curve to fighting games. And the skill comes from, knowing the characters, knowing their movesets, knowing how to execute combos, knowing what, the strengths and weaknesses of this particular matchup are. So it's really about learning the characters, the pieces, and their moves. And that's where the skill ceiling comes in, And I never got good at fighting games because I don't really have the interest in them or the patience for that. Like, and I never had someone who wanted to play like a specific fighting game long enough for us to get interested in that either, which is, fine. But I can appreciate why that's appealing to people. And what I think is interesting about the Tekken the board game implementation is I felt like the skill ceiling was really low. Like, I didn't feel like, I mean, to be fair, we've seen the lightest and simplest version of what this has to offer. I don't know how much more complexity is couched in all the extra Kickstarter stuff. Maybe the strategic depth really broadens out, really gets very deep in the further content. But, we've got 2 borderline identical decks with a small number of cards that are micro variations on what's available in the core set. And then we've got, this guesswork around whether or not we defend, or not even whether or not you defend, but what you pick to defend, and the heuristics for that are kind of the same for every character. It's just the probability of what cards they might have in their hand. And, you can just pick based on the card they've already played. If they've already played a card and it's going to give a little buff to a low attack, you might just pick low because if you're wrong, at least they didn't play a low card. And if you're right, you've mitigated that little benefit they would have had. But then there's also this idea of card counting and their character combos. And, you can take all that on board, but I don't think that is necessarily a particularly high skill. I don't think that there's a huge skill ceiling to that. And also, like, there could be a lot of downtime if people are getting really heads down calculational about it, And then there's always going to be this question of, like, can I track the cards that you've played? Well, yeah. I mean, technically you've seen them all. What, do you want to write it down? Like, it's not that long a game. It's a 20-minute game,
Yeah.
It's a 20-minute game. So, it wants to be played real quick. It's got a really low skill ceiling, I think.
Yeah, not to undersell some of the guesswork, like, if somebody's not standing next to you, you can kind of assume they're not going to play a high strike, because that only does damage if they're standing next to you. So now you're 50-50 on medium or low, which both contain moves. Unless the previous card in their chain gives their high a move ability bonus, and then they've opened up the possibilities, their mix-ups there. Now you got to try and defend top, middle, bottom, those kind of things. So it's not like there's no skill there, and it's not like there's no information to base your blocks on. And you also know there's a memory element of what have they played before, because you know how many cards they have of each type and of each colour, for whether they're going to go for their combos. But you don't want to be remembering all of that, really. And you certainly don't want to be taking notes mid-game as to what people have played.
Well,
so I was thinking more about
like
this.
It wants to be that long, right?
No, it's not. It's not that kind of game. I was thinking about this, like the Tekken IP. I guess they're going to try and appeal to video game players and maybe not hobby gamers.
Yeah.
And to that degree, what the game includes is a suitable level for people who are only familiar with mass market games. It's a little bit more involved, but it is not so deep that it puts people off. Like, you can be up and running in this game quite quickly, and then you can get a little bit better, and then you're probably capped out at how good you can get at it.
I think that's a really astute observation. This does feel like it's not targeted really at the hobby audience.
No. Other than the fact that it launched on GameFound.
Yeah, that's
which
true.
is just odd. Now, sure, they're trying to sell you 40 miniatures and 12 boards and or 12 arenas and all this kind of thing as well. But I can see it coming to retail, and I feel like, GameFound's just subsidizing the retail push for the mass market.
Yeah.
Should it do well. And it's good enough, it's just not the kind of game I want to be playing regularly.
Hobby gamers will be left dissatisfied. That is my take. I think if you're into this hobby and you're familiar with mechanisms and you like, these sort of games that reward repeated plays and memorizing movesets or distinct characters with different feels, you will want to look at BattleCon or Sakura Arms. If you want a really light little fighting game, I would have suggested Knockdown by Awakened Realms. It's not great, but it's quicker than this, and I think it's a smaller box, but apparently it's impossible to find. I actually looked for it on their website, and they don't even have it listed there. I've never known they even made it, if I hadn't made videos about it.
They won't admit to it.
Yeah, it's ironic, really, because it's got better ratings on BGG than Siege Storm, but then they didn't disown that. But, this is the redheaded stepchild. They've forgotten about it completely. Anyway, but yeah, so I guess I've only got more complex recommendations. But the good news is, I guess, if a really light fighting game sounds like something you'd quite like in your collection, you can get just the sort of BGA content that's available at the moment in like a 25 or 30 pound box, I think you said.
Yeah, I think it was 25 euros even.
You can get that one-on-one two-player set relatively cheap, and that's might scratch an itch or fill a niche in your collection if you're so inclined.
Yep. Worth noting that starter set is contained within the core set. You don't need both if you're getting the core set.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a standalone, fully functional two-player game. You'll get Jin and Kazuya, and you can make do with that. You're almost able to DLC it, you know? If you can see another character sheet and get their combos, you could potentially homebrew some stuff as well.
No, we do not. We do not condone pirating board games.
Make your own characters.
Yeah, just make up your own characters. Well, I mean, it is just a couple of combos and 4 cards. And the rage cards, right? We didn't really talk about them, but they're just unique little abilities that trigger when you get to low health. It's quite fun.
Oh, comeback mechanism.
But, you know, I was not inspired to go out and buy this. I will not be buying it.
Fair. Well, from no game to medium heavy game.
Are we doing yours first? Does that make sense?
Do you want to do yours?
Nobody's heard of mine. Nobody knows what it is.
Okay, fine. Let's keep them interested to the end.
Yeah. We'll keep them in. Barry's got one that you might be interested to hear about. I think I've covered it a little bit on the channel before. Have I? I don't know. I'll find out before we talk about it. Anyway,
I mentioned it.
The point is, I've been playing an interesting game that I backed on crowdfunding. It is from some first-time designers who had a passion project, and it is one box containing everything the game needs to be. There were no crowdfunding elements beyond just the game. There was nothing else. There's no fancy extra bits or anything. I've been playing Railways of the Lost Atlas. This is designed by Kevin Delger and Jacob Sach. And they are both first-time designers. This is the only game they've designed. The artist is Studio Delger, and they've only done this game. This game is very 18xx. It looks prettier, actually, than 18xx. It's actually got really nice graphic design, which is why I was keen to credit the artist. However, Studio Delger only have this one game to their credit, and also they've got a bio on BGG that was just very weird. It felt like an AI wrote it. So I don't know who they are. If you are them, feel free to ping me an email. I'll give you some proper credit, but I couldn't find out anything else about Studio Delger. But I do like the presentation of this game. It's very user-friendly, it's very readable, and it evokes the sort of, 18xx rail building stuff in a way that looks nice, The publisher is Asterisk Games, which I believe is Kevin Delger and Jacob Sach set up to publish this game. It is a 2 to 5 player game. The BGG says best at 4. I've only played it at 5. I liked it at 5. I have no concerns about the 5 player game. Now, the playtime is 1 hour to 5 hours. This is a proper 18xx game. So it comes with a short version and a long version. If you're playing 5 player, I believe you have to do the long version. I do think the short version might feel a little bit like you're not playing the full game, but I don't know because I haven't tried it. However, if you're 2 players who are super across it, playing the short version, maybe you can get through it in an hour. If you're playing the 5 player game, 5 hours is probably about right, maybe 6. If you're all very across it, I'm sure it will be 5 hours or maybe even less. The weight is 3.87, which is, pretty heavy. Gloomhaven's a 3.92, Ark Nova's a 3.78, and 1830, Railways and Robber Barons, the original and quintessential 18xx, is a 4.17, which I was surprised by, actually, because from what I understand, this game is as heavy as that game, if not heavier, although it is more modular. So maybe 1830 should have come down a bit. I don't know. Or maybe Atlas should be Railways of the Lost Atlas should be slightly higher. Anyway, do not be fooled by the lack of 18xx in the title. It is an 18xx game. If you don't know anything about 18xx, they are long train games in which you build railways. You start with a map that's empty and you're going to put out railways. And it's not really about that. It is about that, but it's also about the fact that you can buy stocks in the railway companies. And so you'll sort of start off by getting a couple of shares in a railway company. This is called floating a company in the vernacular of the hobby people in the know. You'll float a company, you'll get a couple shares in it, you might become president of that, you will become president of that company until other people buy shares. You've got a portfolio of shares, and if you have the most shares, you get to run the company, and running the company means you get to build the railways and decide where the trains go. And also, pretty importantly, you decide once the train makes money, is it going to pay that money out as dividends to the shareholders, or is it going to hold it and use it to develop the service? At the end of the game, you're going to have a bunch of money that you've made during the game. You're going to have all your shares. You're going to sell them for the current market value, which will have gone up if the train company kept making money, and go down if it stopped making money. They also go down if it doesn't pay dividends because everyone's unhappy. So if it keeps withholding money, share price will go down. But you'll trade out all your shares for money for their market value, and then whoever has the most money is the winner. And usually you start with 200 or something, and by the end of the game you got, thousands and thousands. So, big uptick of money. And that's pretty common to most 18xx games, those fundamentals. Now there are ways to reduce share prices. There are ways to sort of hostilely become the president of these companies. You can sell off shares to reduce the value of things. And you can, you also have to take risks starting new companies, and that's especially risky in the late game, but you might convince other people to go in and buy shares on it, and then you could potentially pull out of the company, leaving them with a bunch of bad shares, or you could make that company great together if your investments work out. There is an added wrinkle where you actually have to get trains to run on these lines, and the trains will rust, and so you can get locked into having just bad train stock that's going to go out of commission, and then you're left unable to operate for a round, which can be really bad. So there's all these sort of things that you're trying to manage and not get caught out, and optimize your money. And the companies will change hands. It's not uncommon for players to be left with no companies, and they're just trading stocks. Railways of the Lost Atlas shakes this up in a couple of ways. Keep in mind, I've played 1830 one time and no other 18xx games. So I am very novice at these train games. I understand them. I understood them, or at least how they worked, but I've never actually played them until I played 1830, and I've not had any more experience after that. So until Railways of the Lost Atlas. But what this does that's sort of different to traditional 18x games is it's got a modular board. So the board is tiles and not a big board that you fold out. Like normally these games have a big board that you fold out, and it's a specific geographic area that it's modeling. And so you might buy one that's modeling trains around the areas that you like, or something thematically, or a time period you think is enjoyable. And there's usually an abstraction of time passing as well. It's usually to do with that train stock I talked about going out of commission, right? Like you'll buy those steam engines at the beginning of the game. By the end of the game, you get these high-speed rails that can go anywhere. And as the trains get decommissioned, that's like the passage of time. But this modular board in Railways of the Lost Atlas is a ton of tiles, and players will take turns sort of building out a board that's going to be the board you're going to play the game on. And it's got some suggested starting setups if you've never played before. So when we played the 5-player introductory map, but there's some really interesting stuff going on there. And I think that people who like 18xx but maybe want something that feels a bit fresh or a bit unusual might like this. I know a lot of people also like the fact that 18xx has 0 luck and 0 randomization. You could feasibly recreate every setup for Railways of the Lost Atlas and play it the same way every time. So if you did like that and you found a setup you liked, you could just record that and then just set it up the same way every single time. You don't have to randomize it, or you don't have to use this system of people putting out tiles. But, if you were interested in sort of a more dynamic scenario, that's part of what this offers. So the other thing it's got is that the minor companies all have special powers. And these special powers are unique game-breaking powers. So you'll get like the Bridges Company that can build bridges over water. And you'll get the Spacious Company that starts in a really valuable city and also gets to have 1 extra train capacity, which is massive, by the way. And the Resourceful Company that can use trains that have rusted for at least another operational phase. So like these powers, awesome. And each little company has one. And then later on in the game, you'll merge them into major companies, and that's two minor companies coming together, and then they get both special powers, so you can combo them. I thought this was really cool. And of course, like if you're setting up that modular map, you're going to be looking to try and see where the little companies are, where the minor companies are, and sort of evaluating the board state to try and value up the worth of the company, which is going to be a big deal because you're investing in it. And so that's one of the major changes this does. The other actual major change, which is a big thing, is that most of the 18xx games have a certificate limit. So that's the number of stocks you can hold. This has no limit. You can have, as long as there are stocks available in the market, you can get them all. That's crazy. But I really liked these ideas. And so I backed it because I also thought, like, I'm not going to buy 15 18xx games. So I'll get the one that's a bit random and feels a bit fresh and different every time I play. Actually, one of the other cool things about the random setup is that the minor companies are available in 3 marketplaces, but only they're stacked up, and like you can see what's coming up in the market, but only the top card is available. So there's 3 available at a time, and then when you buy one or you float the company, you set it up, then the one underneath becomes available. And so people might be like waiting for a more like viable company to come up, and you might get stuck because there's this really crummy company on top of a really valuable one, and so there's that cool consideration there. And again, like if you like a fixed setup, you can set that marketplace up. You can do it at random, or you can set it up deliberately to sort of recreate a scenario you really like. So again, all the randomness can just be not removed, but it's like a seed for a random setup, right? You just keep with the same seed every time. Anyway, I played with 4 players who have much more 18xx experience than me, and I really enjoyed the game. I really liked it. And I'm not a big fan of math in games, and oh boy, is there a lot of math in this game. But and all 18xx's have loads of math, and arguably they all become very maths at the end. It's kind of true. It's like a weird sort of curve where like the beginning of the game is really exciting as you're setting up all these train companies, and then like towards the end you're just kind of doing math round after round. But this felt like the right length. It felt like it ended at precisely the right time. I floated a company in the penultimate round of the game. I think it's 7 rounds, but I could be wrong. But I floated a company in the penultimate round that became incredibly profitable thanks to its special power, which was really good, or really interesting. That was fun. That shook things up at the end. And some of the people I was playing with, everybody really liked it. Certainly in the context of 18xx. Now, bearing in mind, these are all people that like 18xx. But they all really liked it, and some of them even went so far as to say this is their favorite one so far. So I feel like this is probably something you may not have heard of, but it's clearly designed by 2 people who love 18xx games and just wanted to bring sort of like maybe some more of the spicy hobby elements like modular boards and asymmetrical powers into a more traditional style of game. And I just think they've done a really good job. I thought it was really fun. I mean, it's still super cutthroat, and there's some variations that you can play. We played with the cutthroat stock rules, where every time you sell a single stock, the market ticks down by 1. You can play the more gentle rules, where every time you sell any amount of stock for a company, it goes down by 1 instead of 1 per stock. There's also this concept of hostile mergers, because at the moment, if you want to merge 2 minor companies into one of the major companies, then the 2 presidents have to agree that that's going to happen. And if you have play with the hostile merger variant, everyone who owns a share gets a vote on it, which I thought would be really fun. But unfortunately, we didn't play with that. So I don't know. But I'd definitely like to try that. I think that'd be really interesting. And I just like the idea of more player interaction. Of course, once the 2 companies merge, whoever has the most overall shares will become the president. Which is, and if you're tied for shares, then it's whoever's shares were worth more in the market becomes the president. But it also has this lovely graphic design element where you've got like these sort of tarot-sized cards that represent the minor companies. And when you form a major, the two tarot-sized cards slide together and you put this like merger card over the top. And so now they get the name. So if you create a company that's like North Point and resourceful, they'll become like the resourceful North Point firm. You know, it's really fun. Anyway, just really, and so going back to Studio Delger, whoever that is, really good job on the graphic presentation, really cute sort of presentation, really appealing. I really like this one. If you don't, there is still all of the problems with 18xx, tons of maths. When you're running the trains, you have to sit down and work out where all the most profitable routes are, and you can make mistakes, and you can't really have backseas because there's too much maths, and we can't undo what you did to work out the maths. But it's and there's also effective elimination. Like if you're in the middle of the game and you've played really badly and you've got no money and you're not president of anything, you're kind of stuck for the long haul. And the other thing is like you can just go bankrupt in this as well, and then you're just out. If you only own stocks in train companies that have no trains, you must buy trains. If after trying to buy the trains you have no money, you're out. So you have to try to manage that financial portfolio, because being the president is fun. You get to make all the decisions for the train company. You can, so do what's in the best interests of you and or the company, or use the company as a feeder company for your other companies, which is devious. But if the company has no trains, you have to pay out of your own personal pocket for those trains. So there is some collateral risk for you as well, which is great. It's really fun.
No, it sounds good. Like I've been looking. So Studio Delger is the name. They are a real company.
Good.
But they seem to do branding and graphic design more than board games specifically. But obviously,
they must know one of the designers or something then.
Yeah.
I mean,
for that one,
I guess that's why their blurb sounded so marketing.
Yes. Yeah, they're real. If you Google them. There is a Mr. Tim Delger and a Nicole Delger.
Oh my God, I just realized the designer's Kevin Delger.
There we go then.
It's family business. There you go.
We've solved the problem. And then I was like, do I know the difference between an 18xx and a route building game? Because I was thinking, I've not really played 18xx's. I've played Iberian Gauge. I've played Mini Express. I've played Age of Steam or Railways of the World. Mm-hmm. But they're not really 18xx games.
Not even close.
And I'm trying to figure out specifically what makes it an 18xx. And those games don't have presidents. They can have shares, they can have routes, they can have all the other elements that go into it. But I don't think any of them have owners of the rails.
So when you say Iberian Gauge, I think of the whole Iron Rail series, which are they Capstone, the series?
That is Capstone, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a number of them, and I think one of them, and it might be Iberian Gauge, one of the, or it might be the Irish one. One of them has this concept of stocks that you buy. And I think on your turn, you get to place trains, but you can either only place trains if you have stocks or only place trains if you have the most stocks, which is kind of a much more simplified version of the president concept. So I think far be it from me, I'm not an expert, but as a novice who's had some experience, what I would say really characterizes 18xx is you are constantly trying to evaluate, based on quite a complex game state, whether you want to keep the company, whether you want to be the president, whether you want to hold on to the shares you've got. You're sort of playing the market by gauging the potential for the company. And that's going to be about board position, what other people are doing, and also it's going to be about when those trains are going to rust, and stuff like that. There is also I think this is in many 18xx games, this idea of upgrading parts of the board as well. You upgrade the towns so that they become more profitable and things like that. So that sort of represents, I suppose, the infrastructure that you're building, bringing more profitability to these areas. There's elements of blocking. Of course, the Iron Rails has that by dint of one train per space, right? And I think Iron Rails is usually put them in the hexagons. I can't remember if there's a variant of it where you put them on sort of predefined tracks. But, I think the Iron Rails game where you've got, I think it's the Irish one. Irish Gauge, is it just Irish Gauge?
Irish Gauge, yeah.
If that's the one with the stocks, where you buy stocks at the beginning of your turn, then that's probably the closest, but you don't ever sell stocks in that, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing, like being able to sort of get out of a company, being able to offload it onto another player, being able to merge companies. So it's more in depth, right? And there's a lot more opportunity for sort of route building and money making, and also this decision about whether you put the money back into the company. Like if you're going to try to check out of a company, you want it to pay it all out in dividends. But if you've been splashing all of the profits onto dividends for the shareholders, and then somehow everyone dumps their shares and you're stuck as president of that company, and then the trains are going to rust, that's a bummer. Like, it's not really a bummer, because if you've got money, you'll be able to, you'll have to buy a really expensive train for the company, because typically when the trains rust, it's because new things have become available and you just have to discard what you've got and get something new. Now, if you could have two trains, you might have two trains and maybe one didn't rust. As long as you've got a train, you can keep running, but it'll be less profitable. But if you have to buy a new train because you've got nothing to operate, you have to have a train. So then you might have to pay a huge amount of money out of your personal stock, and that could be a huge setback. So if you could have offloaded that to somebody else who's then stuck with that liability, that would be great. And I think it's those kinds of strategic thinking that makes 18xx that way, or what it is.
I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for playing this. I don't think I've done or playing 18xx games. There's whole conventions around both 18xx's and train games.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy a train game. I should probably have a crack at a real grown-up 18xx.
Well, set aside a day, especially if people aren't. I was blessed by being at a table where I was the least experienced, which was great and made for a really gentle introduction. But it was really nice to see how excited everyone was about the sort of quirks that Railways of the Lost Atlas offered, like the crazy powers of the minor companies especially. And the fact that you could have as many stocks as you wanted, everyone was like, that's crazy. Normally it's like 5, And so I guess what I would say is, like, I think Railways of the Lost Atlas might also be a really good entry point, because it's not dry. Like, it doesn't feel as, I mean, 1830 definitely felt drier than this. And the other thing about 1830 is, like, people really know the fixed plays. And so there's almost like a whole metagame where people are playing around what they expect or think that people should be doing with certain companies and certain routes. So it was really nice to see that this sort of shook that up and opened up a bit more dynamism. Now, you could potentially have that in every game, but also if you're playing with the modular board, that's going to get shaken up every time you play. And I just find that sort of that more dynamic landscape more interesting than memorizing fixed routes and things like that. Some people will disagree, and that's fine. And what I'm saying is, you can just have a fixed setup if you want to really hammer the same scenario over and over again. But I do think also that the fact that this has sort of short variants, gentler variants, and it comes with some pre-made maps to ease you in introductory stuff, I do think it's a really good entryway to 18xx. And it's coming back to crowdfunding with an expansion. So you can check it out if you want to find a copy. Because I don't know how hard this is to find. Maybe it's dead easy, but I feel like it's probably not.
No. Wouldn't have thought so. No, it sounds good. Might check it out. Maybe it'll be my 18xx game.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, if you don't want to get a whole ton of them, I reckon you could probably just have this one and get a lot of replayability out of it.
Nice. All right, headline feature. let us finish on the game everybody's been clamouring for. Don't know if that's true. But this is Tiletum, Prospect for Silver. This is published by Board and Dice, designed by Simone Luciani and Daniele Tascini, who have combined Marco Polo, and there's never enough money in this game to do what you want, Tzolk'in, the games they've done together. Other Luciani games, Darwin's Journey, which enjoyed, Nucleum, Barrage, but other Tascini games I don't really play. And the artists on this one are Kate Radziuk and, let's try this one, it starts with a Z, not a easy thing to say in the Zbigniew Mgelter, and again, I apologise if that is not correct. There's not a huge amount of art in the game though, so maybe you won't mind so much. So for people who don't know, Tiletum is a 1 to 4 player. Is that even how you say it? Is it Tiletum? Tiletum?
I believe it's Tiletum.
Tiletum, yeah.
Or actually, I might have been saying Tiletum. I think it is Tiletum. I feel like it's Tiletum.
Yeah, Tiletum.
Tiletum, oh god. Anyway.
All depends where you put the emphasis.
I'm going to let Barry dive into this, but I will point out as well, if you want a visual aid, you can check out our video review from 2022 that we did on this as well. Ready, Steady, Played, Tiletum.
Yeah. So Tiletum is a 1 to 4 player dice-based action drafting game where players are merchants and architects in Renaissance-era Europe, competing to trade wool and steel, whilst also contributing to the major cathedral developments that were happening around Europe at that time. The game abstracts this mostly to contract fulfillment and generally earning victory points, because it is a Euro game. The key mechanism in Tiletum is the action rondel. Each round, a number of dice are rolled depending on player count and placed into the matching action spot that corresponds to that number. And then at the end of each round, that rondel moves around one, and next round, the value of an action changes each time. The dice themselves are coloured to match the different resources, so that's gold, wool, food, steel, and the action slots themselves allow you to take actions with your merchant piece, your architect piece, take character actions, which is collecting tiles to fill your houses, collect contracts, which you want to fulfill, move along a king track, which is always working against you to be sort of negative points, or a wild action if there's nothing better that you can do. The value and colour of the die that you take determines what resources that you get, and then you'll be able to take as many actions from the action slot that is the opposite of that dice. So if you took a 3 iron die, in the merchant space, you would get 4 merchant actions. If it was a 4 iron die in the merchant space, you would get 3 merchant actions. But that number changes each round, and that's what's going to determine what your income is, or what resources you get, and how many actions you get to take. Players will draft 3 different times throughout the round, one at a time in player order, and then at the end of each round there is an end of round scoring, but only if your merchant's in the location of the fair that's being scored, or you've built a house there. There is some agency to what dice you're going to choose, as you can always spend 2 gold to increase or decrease the value of a die, and the game's all really laid out for you. You know what the values of each action is going to be for each of the 4 rounds. That's determined at the start, and so you can work out when you want to take an action as long as there's a die that matches it, but you do have the ability to change the value to get the actions you want. So that's the core game. The Prospect for Silver adds an element of breadth to the game, where it gives you a new piece, the Prospector. So in addition to your merchant and your architect, which is going to be moving around the map of Europe, the Prospector is moving around a side map of mines. And the other key new feature is tech trees, which you're able to upgrade to give you bonuses to actions or abilities or resources, depending on what you're doing. But in order to facilitate this, there is a new wheel, new rondel, which has an inner and keeps the outer ring the same, but there's an inner ring now.
This replaces the original?
It replaces the original, okay. Yes. So you get a board that you place over the top of the whole thing, and other than the fact that it's got this inner wheel now with the prospector actions, the outer actions are still the same. The way that works is that the inner wheel covers 2 of the outer actions, and if you were to take either of those actions, you could instead take the prospector action. So now you would take the 3 iron and you could take 4 prospector actions instead of the merchant action, which is where that slot is. But not both. So you're not getting both. But the other side of the wheel also covers 2 spots, and that grants a bonus move to the prospector in addition to the action that you're taking. So you either take a straight up prospector action, or on the other side of the wheel you'll get a free prospector move, which helps you get around the map. Because there's no more... The game doesn't give you any more actions. You've still got your 3 dice that you're drafting around, except now you've got a whole nother map to deal with and a whole nother set of resources to deal with. That doesn't give you any additional turns to do anything with. So the prospector is on its own board. This is a modular board. There's 3 double-sided tiles, large tiles, that are maps that your prospector can move around. The first one everybody starts on. The other 2 you would unlock by spending silver that you earn to get a second and or potentially third prospector piece. But they're all the same. The actions that prospector can do is move, collect tiles. They have all the same actions that the merchant and the architect have, except they can only do them in the mines. So they can move, they can place a house, they can build a pillar, which lets you build a cathedral. They can take a bonus tile from a space that they're in, and they have the additional action of building a mine, which earns you silver. And silver is the new resource, as you might have guessed from the name of it, prospect for silver, which you can use to upgrade your tech trees, as well as fulfill contracts, place out new miners, and what else can you spend silver on? Stuff. There's a lot of stuff to spend silver on, and there's not a lot of silver going about, but I'll come on to that in a minute. So you can dig deeper by putting out additional miners. At the start of the game,
Balrog?
Yeah, that's it. They've gone too deep. If you get to the end of the 3rd track, you awaken the Balrog, and then there's a fight. And so there you're going to take all the dice you've taken in the round, roll it. No, none of that happens.
I want that.
That's a new expansion. As part of setup, you're going to randomize which 3 tech trees out of 9 come out, and that could be... They typically reference an action you'll do. So they'll give you the first level on the merchant one will let you take 1 additional merchant action when you choose a merchant die. Fine. Or maybe it'll be the first level will let you change your resources, or not change your resources, but you can spend your wood as gold. Something like that. Mm-hmm. And you'll also get some additional scoring depending how high those tracks you get. But silver is hard to come by. And so the first level will cost you 1 silver, the next level will cost you 2 silver, and the top level will cost you 3 silver. You're not getting up all 3 of those tracks. Like, there's no way you're getting that much silver in a game, and you want to be spending silver on other stuff. So these tech trees, you have to be very focused on what you want to do and what you want to achieve. You'll maybe get 3 levels worth of stuff throughout the game, 4 if you really focus on it. Overall, the expansion adds a breadth to the game without adding much in the way of overhead or additional rules or really any additional depth. If instead of moving your merchant, you want to go and build a house by using your prospector, you would do that instead. Right? It's an alternative to what you already had, and it's a whole other area of the board to compete over, but it's not really changing anything significantly from the base game. things that you will need to know, or might want to know, is, as I mentioned a couple of times now, silver is hard to come by. You'll get silver if you're particularly high up on the king's track at the end of a round. You'll get 1 or 2 silver. When you build a mine, you'll get 1 silver. There are new bonus tokens that will provide you a silver, and I think that's the only ways you can earn silver. And if everybody's competing for those, it's very difficult because you have to spend silver to place a second prospector on the next map, or 2 silver to place it on the third map. You don't have to do them in order. A lot of the contracts that are now added require a silver. So the additional tiles, there's a contract that requires a silver and something to earn a certain number of points. A lot of the tech tree stuff is really interesting and can power your game, and you might want to get to the top of that. Something like the top of the character tech tree allows you to activate everybody in your house when you complete it. And so getting double your character actions can be really powerful if you go in for that, because it's also really good for scoring. And there's just not enough silver going around to let you do everything. So fine, you've got those agonizing decisions for what you want to do. If it was, super abundant, then it's not that interesting, but it's also quite restrictive. So don't expect to see everything the expansion has to offer the first time you play.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the new maps, the mines that the prospector moves around, I've only played, I've played it at 3 and 4 player, the expansion at 3 and 4 player. I guess that it's trying to solve some issues that space on the main map was really tight at 4 players. Like there's not enough. You're competing over areas to build cathedrals, because some cathedrals only have 2 spots, and some have 3, some have 4. And at 4 players, where you got to and what you got was really important. There's not enough space for houses for people to have high scoring rounds at 4 players because they're all super competitive. The maps and the mines have the opposite problem, in that if anybody's doing the mines, you're probably the only person doing the mines. And so now you've got 3 people on the main map and 1 person in the mines, and the other players kind of dabbling. And now there's just too much. There's too much that's open at that point, and you don't have that tension for who's going to get what. The first space on the mine, maybe people moving around there. If you go to any of the other maps, nobody's chasing you. Like, nobody's following you. You're going to have free reign of a whole mine to yourself, because if you've got the silver to do that, chances are they've not. You've built the mines on that first level, you've scooped up the silver tokens, you've moved on to the next level, and there's not enough silver to go around for people to come chasing you. So it loses a little bit of the tension that way. That's reflected in that the game now comes with 300 and 400 point tokens. So they know that you're going from 100, 200 points to 300, 400 points, because the game is now much more open and there's more ways of scoring and it's much easier to score. The games that I've played have demonstrated that you don't need to engage with the mines at all, right? The games have been close, but in the couple of games that I've played, the winner has not engaged with the mine beyond the sort of free moves or maybe the odd bonus action to put something down there. Second place has typically been the miner, me. But it has not been a winning strategy. It is an alternative, and so again, that just, as I say, adds to the breadth part of it. But it does seem like at least fairly balanced there. There is some possibilities. If things went a little better for me, sure. It's been 10 points in it. Like, it's not been a big blowout from the person that did the mines versus the person that didn't do the mines, or vice versa. Speaking of scoring, there's a new scoring tile, and now you're scoring either, it depends, it's double-sided, you're either scoring for pillars or mines for your big score. So your houses times pillars or mines, or your pillars times houses or mines. And that's where a lot of points come from. Like, you can get 40 points pretty easily out of that, maybe even more, but you can't ignore either to the detriment of other things, if that makes sense. So if you wanted to go heavy on mines, you still can't ignore pillars, because you need pillars to get cathedrals, and there's cathedrals in the mines, and so your focus is divided a little bit there for going all in on one strategy, and you find that you're probably going to be weaker by spreading yourself that way, depending on what the end game scoring is. In fact, that's why I lost the second game, because I didn't get enough houses down because I was focusing on mines and pillars when I should have focused on one of the two. But you can't just focus on mines. You have to have pillars, because cathedrals are really good scoring opportunities, particularly when the end of round scoring is also something to do with cathedrals. And that's always been the case in the games I've played. What else? There's a new crest. If you don't know the game, crests complete houses. In the base game, it's really tight. There's only 6 different ones, and you want 6 different ones. There's now a 7th. It does make that a little looser, which again contributes to people's scores going a bit higher. And because the game doesn't give you any extra actions to interact with this whole new board area, or doesn't give you a lot of extra interaction, the one moves that you might pick up incidentally can be powerful, because moving the prospector can give you bonus actions and bonus points and bonus things. And if you're the first person into a tunnel, sometimes you're going to get the bonus that you find there first. And that just involves moving. So they have really tried to balance it, and it does work. But all they've done is give you something different to do rather than anything additional to do. Like, that was tricky to explain, but instead of moving your merchant or your architect, you might move your prospector. And if you want to engage with your prospector more than one of your other 2 pieces, that's probably what you'll do. And it'll end up being quite close from what I've seen. But it won't be any more interesting than just competing over the spaces on the main map.
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably still quite a lot to explore with the expansion, but none of us have found it any additional fun.
Mm.
The best thing about the expansion is that it gives you a way to track your actions. You've now got an action board you can put your actions on, and so when you're doing one at a time, you take the action tokens off and you know what you still got. It's like, I've done this, it's going to let me combo into this, come into it. And there's a player aid. There's no player aid in the base game, and you need one. Like, just once you know the game, you don't need it. But for your first game, knowing that having 5 merchant actions lets you move a merchant, pick up a tile, place a building, these kind of things is super important. Like, what can you do with your actions is super important, and it doesn't tell you. There's no player aid in the base game, and this one adds them, and they're really useful.
I guess we should thank them for correcting that oversight, but come on, guys.
You don't want to have to buy an expansion just to...
I don't want to buy an expansion for the player aids.
Yeah, the thing is, by the time you need the expansion, you probably don't need the player aids anymore, so... But if you're teaching somebody new, that's there.
I suppose.
Now, if you've not played Tiletum, the fun comes really from the combo elements. So, it's possible to take the merchant action, pick up a bonus tile or 2, place a house, activate all the characters in that house on your board for additional resources or actions. That chains into an architect action, which lets you place a pillar, which lets you build a cathedral for a ton of points. And then you activate a bonus tile that you've stored, gives you that prospector move that moves you over the king's track bonus that moves you 3 points up, that puts you into first place for the end of the round, which earns you a few bonus points and lets you take the tile at the end of the round. Right? Those are entirely feasible and things that happen all the time in a game. You collect these bonus actions and these bonus tiles that you can store up to 4 on your board at a time, and then when you combo them off to do something cool, feels great. Right? I borrowed Tiletum from you initially, and then we played it 5 times that first week, and that just never happens. We've got a lot of games to play. The fact that everybody just wanted to play it again, kind of straight away, is just illustrative of how much fun people found the game. And getting the expansion now has had it back to the table a couple of times this week, and everybody's like, oh, I really like this, yeah, we should play it more. But everybody's been saying, I don't want to play with the mines, which is the 90% of the expansion. And I wouldn't have played with the mines a second time, but I couldn't be bothered separating all the pieces back out again.
So you would have gone back to the base game? Or is it's not modular?
No, because there's nothing you can do with the expansion that doesn't require silver, and the only way to have silver is to have the mines. So it is all or nothing, really, for that one. So overall, it's fine, but it's unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And nobody's had more fun with the expansion than they were having with the base game. If you're the kind of group that has played Tiletum a 1,000 times. You particularly play it 4 players and you find it too cutthroat. Yeah, this expansion's quite good. As I said, the overhead's not too much. It looks like a lot more, but really it's just, instead of, you've got another piece to move. And if you know how to move 2 pieces, you can move a 3rd piece. But if you're looking for something that's really going to shake up the game and change it dramatically, this is not it.
What about table space?
The table increases the table space. I struggle to fit it on comfortably for 4 players. Like, you've got the mines off to one side, you've got the your resource trees off to another side, you've got your tech tree kind of sandwiched between 2 players on one side. It is a table hog. It's like, another 1/3 of the board again, and it's already a 6-piece board for that one. And the people that are newer to the game, because I've played this with people that are brand new to Tiletum, trying to put them in a position where they're able to see everything and can see the end of round scoring and the mines and what's on the board, and still be able to see what's there on the contracts and what dice they want to take and what the bonus actions are on those. It's tricky. Like, it takes up a lot of space. So if you don't have a lot of table space, this is also not for you. It does add to what's already quite a large board. That said, I have managed to fit everything into the main box, but it does take a bit of doing. If anybody can get an insert in there as well, I will be impressed. Everything is in the box, just and no more. But it does make setting up a little longer than it should be, because everything's very much shoved in there, stacked in. So it was good for reminding me why Tiletum's so good. It was not so good, as this is going to reinvigorate the game in any sort of meaningful way. It's fine if you're looking for more variety. It's not even more variety. Like, if you're looking for something else to do within the system, this adds it. If you weren't looking for that, I wouldn't suggest seeking it out.
And what about, you said here that you might maybe at 4, but wouldn't even bother with it at 3 players.
Yeah, certainly at 3 players, I want a little bit of competition for the space.
Yeah.
And the base game does, negates a couple of spaces at 4 players, but not for the cathedrals, which is where you really want to be kind of competing. You want to have a race to get to that bottom corner to be one of the 2 players that gets to build that cathedral. Whereas, if you want to go up to London, sure, there's loads of things in London, but all 4 players can build that cathedral. And I can't remember. Like, I need to play the base game more at 4 to understand if it's limiting, too cutthroat, too confrontational for the spaces, to really think, well, actually, giving another player something else to do might be worth it. I need to play a few more games to remind myself of that. But I think at 3 players, it becomes very uninteresting, the map, at 3 players, because with the mines, because there's just 2 players on the map, they've got loads of space, 1 player on the mines, they've got loads of space. And there's no interaction at that point.
So do you think you'll keep it? Play with it again?
I'll definitely keep it because I've fit it into the box. But yeah, I don't know. I like it. If I'm keeping a base game, I've never thrown away an expansion. So yeah, I mean, I'll definitely keep it, but I don't think it's necessary.
I guess what I really meant was, do you think you'll keep playing with it, or will you just go back to the base game?
I think I'll just go back to the base game. Most people want to play again. So again, testament to everybody really liking Tiletum.
Yeah.
But I think most people will be happy if I got rid of the expansion and just played the base game. And if we do that, and if it does prove to be at 4 players, it's too restrictive to get good combos and what you want to do, because obviously all the tiles clear a lot quicker if everybody's focused on the same area, and you don't get those big combo turns. And that's where the real fun of the game is, getting those big combo turns, because you've built up 3 extra Joker actions, and you've got 2 extra architect actions, and that's going to and then you're going to complete your house because you've kept a crest, and that's going to let you take the action that lets you teleport your architect, which is going to let you build the pillar on the big cathedral, and that's going to get you like 17 points for this one action, and that's great. Anyway,
just to be clear, it is a a game set in Renaissance Europe, so teleporting is completely legitimate.
Yeah. It's fast travel.
Cool. Well, I guess I'll give this one a miss then. I don't think I get Tiletum to the table enough anyway, and I can't even remember if I've even played it at 4. Maybe I have. But I'm inspired to get it out again. We were favorable. We reviewed it quite favorably, I think, and I was positive about it. You know, in a world of sort of homogenous Euros, this one stands out by just being very sort of tight and having just the right amount of comboing and interesting sort of successive knock-on effects.
Yeah, the dice drafting at the start, which is, you know, key part of the game, you're just hoping that the people aren't going to take it before you. Like, the turn order is so important for getting the bonuses for taking the first dice from an area, and the desire to have, oh, actually, I need steel, and there's only one steel being rolled this turn. I hope nobody takes it. You know, all those kind of things. Like, it's just...
no one notices how badly I need it.
Exactly, yeah. You're just covering up your contract so nobody can see what's going on. No, it's good.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing the thoughts on Tiletum. I'm looking up the name of it already. Prospect for Silver. Anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Just I was having a little look. I try and keep my games within a 2-year rotation. I have like a bit over 200 games. I've got 20 games I need to play by the end of this year to keep that 2-year rotation going. But I've also got a bunch of games arriving. And I'm just like, I got to get these played before the end of the year. So I'm going to try and get some of those done. But I've also got a list for Essen. So expect that soon.
There's I've not been nearly so responsible with my collection. I don't keep a 2-year rotation. I would love that. I have sold a bunch of games, which is quite good. So I am whittling down the collection, but it does take a lot of time. And I'm also working on them.
If I didn't have to play other people's games, I'd definitely get through them.
Yeah, well, exactly. You know, I'm like, what do we want to play this week, guys? And they're all like, 4x2. She made another one. And I'm like, all right. Which, by the way, was very interesting. I found it very interesting. But I had the most positive reaction. Ask me about it another time. Maybe that can be a Patreon thing. I don't know. If you want to know about that game. It's pretty weird. But on the subject of Tiletum, I did just get through a copy of Etherstone, which is a card game from Simone Luciani. So I'm excited about that. And I'm going to endeavor to get Scarface back to the table. I spoke about that before. Still haven't managed to set the game up yet, but we will try and do that. And yeah, I guess we're going to have to start looking at that Essen list soon.
I have like 80 games listed. I need to narrow that down.
Listen, Barry, I can help you out with some games, but I don't think I can games.
Not quite that many.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks everyone so much for spending your time with us and for listening to us prattle on about board games. I hope you found this entertaining and interesting, or at least somewhat helpful at the very least. And, you know, thanks so much to the patrons who support the show and help and keep us as independent as possible, as free to speak our minds and cover games in the way we'd like to cover them. So thanks very much to all of you so much for choosing to support the show. If you have any thoughts, comments, or ideas, you can, of course, comment on YouTube. You can comment on Spotify. You can email askgracetodaydpodcast@gmail.com. And if you are a patron, you can, of course, ping me on the Patreon Discord. But thanks, everyone, so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye!